Babysitters overdid it. What seemingly normal parents had dark secrets? Somewhat wholesome story. I used to babysit for the kids down the street when I was in high school. One night I went into the parents' bedroom to get something. I think a puzzle. And there was a book on the nightstand called How to Comfort Your Kids When You're Thinking of Divorce or something like that. The next time I was over, there was a book downstairs on the mom's desk. That was the couple's therapist's guide to saving a failing relationship. It made me sad because the parents seemed really happy together whenever I saw them. I felt bad that they must have been going through a hard time behind the scenes. My parents had a pretty unhappy marriage, so I tried to be extra nice to the kids. I hope they hadn't had to listen to their parents fighting. Anyway, this went on for a few months with no further indications of trouble. I felt like I knew this awful secret that the kids didn't know. One night I came over to babysit. The mom was in grad school and she had a class, and the same books were sitting on the counter. As the mom was leaving, she was like, "Oh, I can't forget the textbooks," and grabbed them off the counter. I actually didn't know what she was studying, so I asked what class she had. Turns out she was studying to be a couples and family therapist. The books I saw were her school books. In retrospect, that made complete sense because the titles were kind of academic, but I immediately assumed they were divorcing. About a decade later, they are still married and the wife is a very successful couples and family therapist. Go figure. Thanks for this story. My daddy hits my mommy sometimes. For that one, I was still in high school. I told my mom what she said and my mom went to the police station to report it. "I like it when you're here, not the other lady. She's mean and she makes me sit in the closet." This little girl was referring to her dad's girlfriend. I told the dad about it and never saw the girlfriend around again. And for some comic relief, my older brother and I play swords in the bathroom. Daddy taught us how. Asked him to show me with his action figures what he meant, expecting the worst, and he says look, and goes in his dad's closet and pulls out these giant foam swords. Cue. Thankfully not all in the same house. My older brother and I play swords in the bathroom. Daddy taught us how. Asked him to show me with his action figures what he meant, expecting the worst, and he says look, and goes in his dad's closet and pulls out these giant foam swords. Give this dad the best dad award. I was babysitting for a local family who owned car dealerships. I answered the phone hello as one does, and it was the father who didn't know his wife had hired a babysitter so she could go to an appointment. He started in with the stupidest sexy voice until he realized it wasn't wife. He hung up. Later he was caught cheating. Not gonna lie, his loyalty had us in the first half. I never really babysat for anyone besides family, but I did dog sit for a woman and her husband for a while. She gave me a tour of the house the first time I went over there, and there was a room in the back of the house that was filled with dildos and other sex toys. She sold them as a side hustle and wanted me to know they were there in case I was uncomfortable. They paid me well and left a great review on the site I was using. I wish they never moved, lol. I love their dogs. That's nice that they had the forethought to show you the weird stuff they have so that you wouldn't feel uncomfortable if you found it by yourself. I nannied for this very rich family with 3 kids from the West Coast who would come to South Florida for summer vacation every year. The mother was in her 30s, clearly had her kids when she was young, and was very stereotypically hot, blonde, thin, big boobs, perfect teeth. Her husband was a little older, salt and pepper, super handsome, very George Clooney-esque. Their kids were all blonde haired, blue eyed, cute as frick. They absolutely adored their parents. Dad would help the kids and mom settle in at the house and then fly back to Cali for work. I babysat 3-5 times a week, 6:30 p.m. to 2 a.m. Mom would get all dolled up, leave her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, and come home very late, clearly drunk, and sometimes brought men home with her that she introduced as her friends. She would often overpay me, which I never complained about, but I worried for the I babysat a lot when I was 13-15. At the time I lived in a small town. I was a very popular babysitter as I also worked at the daycare center. Often I would have kids from 2 or 3 different families at once. I didn't care, I got triple the pay for having 3 different groups of kids. I was recently told why I always had groups of kids like that. Turns out the small town had a swingers club and I was the go-to babysitter for their different groups. Sounds like my ex, until she decided to join in, hence ex. One family I still don't know what was up with them. It's like they were squatting in a model home or something. It was a fully furnished house that looked to be straight out of Better Homes and Gardens magazine, but there was nothing in the drawers, fridge or cabinets. No toiletries in the bathroom except for toilet paper. No food or silverware in the kitchen. No clothes in the closets or in the kids' drawers, and no toys. The lady just told me to order food for the kids and they watched TV. It was weird. It could have been a second home or, well, not very good parents. I used to babysit for my next door neighbor who had an 8-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy. I was 13 when I started babysitting for them, and I knew off the bat the kids were an interesting duo, to say the least. And I have too many stories to tell from when I was watching them. We all went to school together, so when we got off the bus, we'd walk to their apartment and I'd watch them. Made sure we got homework done, and make them the snack of the day. One day, we had a half day at school, and I think the mom forgot, because when we walked into the apartment, I heard one of the doors shut. At the time, we thought it was an intruder, so I grabbed the 5-year's baseball bat, told them to stay in the room, and I do some investigating. I opened the bathroom door, and there was the mom, half naked, with a guy that wasn't her husband. She gave me all the money in her wallet and her business card. She was a photographer and told me to never speak of it again. I caught her cheating and made out with $400 and a $650 photo shoot package. Took pictures for all the upcoming holidays so I could keep giving gifts to my family. I babysat them for about 3 months after, before they moved away. Snack of the day sounds fun. I was babysitting once and the kids were wrestling in the living room. All of a sudden the smell of dank filled the room. I hear the kids stop and say, "What is that?" One of them had knocked over a big tin can on a shelf and the parents' weed stash spilled everywhere. I sent the kids away and cleaned it all up for them and put it back. I babysat for the local policeman when I was teenager. He always came home very drunk and in a weird mood, and one time brought out a homemade Ouija board and persuaded me to take part with his buddies. Always paid me really well. Local policemen. Are there any more, or is it a very small town? If it's a very small town with only one policeman who uses homemade Ouija boards, that seems like the perfect setup to a horror movie. A family member of mine was a babysitter in the 70s. A couple who lived nearby asked her to babysit their baby a few times. I didn't get the sense that she knew them well. Every time she'd go they said the baby was sleeping and not to disturb the baby by checking on it. The baby never cried. The parents would come home and relieve her. She never saw or heard a baby. At the time I don't think my family member thought much of it, but has told me this story several times because it keeps nagging at her. How could a baby be asleep for the entire time she was there? Every time. No noises. Nothing. Today, she thinks there must not have been a baby but has no idea why they'd hire her. I used to babysit when I was around 13-14ish. My neighbors and 3 kids, ages 4, 7, and 11. The house was really nice, always clean and tidy. One time they asked me to babysit for a couple hours. Okay, no big deal. They paid me $6 an hour. When I got there they made the kids shake my hand and say thank you for babysitting us. I thought it was weird, but it was whatever. The parents left and the kids wanted those dinosaur chicken nuggets, so I made them some. As they were eating, the 7-year-old asked for a toy. She said it was in her parents' dresser. I didn't want to snoop around, but if she wanted the toy, I get it for her. I went into the parents' room and found the dresser. I opened the first one and all I see are stacks of cash. Okay, weird but not my business. I went back out to ask the girl what dresser drawer it was in. She goes over and literally points at the second drawer and said, "Oh, don't open that one. It has bags of sugar in it." That's what I hear mommy say. I was like, oh, okay then. She grabs her toy from the 4th drawer and runs off. I did take a peek in the drawer and sure enough, under the socks were bags of C. I was shocked but I didn't say anything. I put everything back where it was and left the room. When the parents got back I took the cash and left. Never babysat there again. TLDR. Babysat some kids and found C in the parents' drawer. I babysit 3-5 times a week. You'd be surprised at how many sex toys I see. A lot of them are just out in the open. like they forgot to hide them. I overnighted once and the guest bed had bondage straps. Parents totally forgot about that. That's not too surprising, but some of their kinks are. Probably the darkest was this 5-year-old girl I babysit. She was the victim of sexual assault for a couple years by an aunt and uncle. No charges pressed or anything. Mom and dad just cut all contact with that side of the family. I live in a small town so I see the aunt pretty often. It's sickening. They understandably have a ton of cameras set up in their house now and aren't gone for more than a couple hours. The child has a very weird bedtime routine, which is how I found out. Not so much as dark but really sad. I babysat for a typical upper middle class family. Dad worked, mom was stay at home. The mother was always a little overprotective, like checking on their daughter the second they got home, but I didn't think much of it. One night they came home and we talked a little. She mentioned how much she loved children and her daughter, so I asked her if they ever thought about having another. She completely broke down and explained that she had multiple miscarriages before and after her daughter, so they stopped trying. I felt really awful and really sad because it seems like she wanted another baby. I have found that so many women tell me about their kids or working on having kids, that even if it's a natural conversation point to ask about having kids, I won't. The risk that the answer would be hard for them is too high. If they want to talk about future kids, they'll tell me without being asked. I was babysitting for my neighbors, and they were super nice people. 2 kids, very Pottery Barn people. They would always come home late, with no cash to pay me, but they'd come by my house literally the next day with the cash, so I never minded. But I was always a little confused as to how they spent all their cash at dinner and a movie and somehow didn't plan to pay the sitter, and how they managed to stay out till 3 AM just doing dinner and a movie. And they were pretty wealthy, so it wasn't like once before they left, when they were in the other room saying goodbye to the kids, I went to move the wife's purse and saw a really big roll of singles. I brushed it off, but then another time their daughter had an allergic reaction and I texted them or SOS. When I got a call back, I picked up and heard club music. It was a couple sittings after that, when I left through the back door and saw the husband in the garage, shaking glitter off their clothes, that I realized they were probably going to a strip club. When I went to college, they switched to using my sister as a sitter, and I sat down with her and explained where they went and not to ask or act suspicious. They were good parents, and it's not like a problem. It was just super not the vibe they gave off, and I kinda found it hilarious. The internet has broken me. When you mentioned going to college, I expected the next line to be something about dancing for them at the club. I'm not sure if this counts, but this is my secret between myself and my nephew. My sister was 23/24 and she was going through her divorce. She and her 3-year-old son came to live with us. I was in high school at the time and devoted all of my after school time to him. He and I were close. We were so close I would be on the couch with him in my lap at 3 AM watching In the Night Garden for the billionth time. Still in my school uniform but now smelling of regurgitated milk and doing math homework with my left arm. Meanwhile my sister would be out partying and whatnot. One day, it was just my nephew and I. At the time he was I think around 4. I was in my school uniform, getting ready to leave for school. He was helping me get ready by putting his favorite toys in my bag. As I was heading out, I told him that I loved him like usual and he replied, "I love you too, mummy." I was stunned but I was already running late, so I brushed it off and went to school. After that, when we were alone, my nephew started calling me mummy. He was genuine. I asked him what about mummy and he tells me how she doesn't really love me. You love me, and nanny loves me. I tried to encourage him to call me auntie again and he did when others were around, but when we were alone, he looked at me with his sweet little eyes and called me mummy. He eventually says, "I wish you were my real mummy." Tantrums become more common for him. He throws them when his mum is around and begins to avoid her hugs. Her hugs were only there to pose for selfies and to show off what a good parent she is. He would start crying and screaming and get sent to his room for misbehaving. My mum, nanny, and my sister would go out and leave me in charge. I would then go to my nephew and give him a big ol' bear hug. I'm not the parent and he isn't my child, but our secret was mutual. I wished he were my child and he wished I was his mum. We had to keep our wishes secret because if my sister knew that I was ruining her image by taking all of the mother-son love, then heck would have broken loose. She was all about self-image to the point she became a compulsive liar, and she also has some other mental problems. His teachers noticed our bond when he entered primary school, and his after-school babysitters knew about his other mum. My nephew is 10 now. I don't know if he remembers any of this, but the other day was my birthday, and for the very first time, he tried to earn money through chores to buy me a gift himself. It was a Squirtle Amiibo. TLDR. My baby nephew and I developed a secret mother-son bond that only teachers and babysitters picked up on, and it had to be secret because his real mum is crazy. The world would be a lot better if we had more people like you around. I used a nanny for a family. At the interview they seemed totally normal. Even the first day wasn't too terrible. I quickly realized that both parents were abusive. Mom had severe anger issues and was medicated for some condition related to it. Dad was a borderline sexual predator who constantly talked about how gross looking his wife was and how if she didn't stop being a bee, he'd divorce her. Their kids were just as bad. One of them was also medicated for behavioral issues. I found out later that the reason they were hiring a nanny opposed to daycare was because their kids had been kicked out of the daycares in the area. Nope the frick out of that situation within a few months. When I was 13-14ish, I used to babysit 2 kids while their parents went to Amway functions. One night, for whatever reason, I looked behind the couch and saw a bunch of magazines. I collected them, thinking they'd been dropped behind there by accident by the kids I babysat. It was a huge stash of Penthouse and Playboy magazines, and I had to quickly hide them before the kids saw them. I was curious, naturally, but I told the mom when she drove me home. I don't recall if she said anything or not, but I stopped babysitting her kids shortly after that because I moved away. Seemingly a happy family, but the child had a lot of odd behaviors. The most obvious one was she'd cry if you laughed in front of her. Her mom told me the 4-year-old child would assume you were laughing at her. One time I group babysat at a neighbor's house with this child, and when the father came to pick the child up, the neighbor's dog went ballistic and tried to bite him. Shortly after it came out that the dad was abusing the daughter. Always trust the dog. I nannied for a wealthy couple. She was a surgeon. He was an architect, and the husband had a study in the house that the wife joked about never being allowed in. Now, I'm a nosy sucker, and I was curious about why you wouldn't let someone in a study, since it looked like a fairly normal room. Big desk, walls covered in bookshelves, books of architecture everywhere. So one day I just roamed around in there. I didn't really find anything, and I was kinda disappointed, but then I grabbed a book off one of the shelves. The thing had money pressed between its pages, about $500, if I had to guess. Picked up another book, found the same thing. I think I checked like 10 different books, and every single one had money hidden in it. Still not sure if the dude was just paranoid about banks or if he was intentionally hiding money from his wife. I was babysitting at my neighbor's house. They were a young couple, early 30s, with 2 kids aged 5 and 8. I was 16 at the time, and the first questions they asked me was if I had a boyfriend and if I was a virgin, because they didn't want me seeing boys while babysitting. I think part of the reason why they asked this is because they were pretty wild themselves and probably did crazy stuff when they were younger and babysitting. When they found out I smoked, they always left some cigarettes for me. They always told me that they'd be home around 12 or 1, but most of the times I would fall asleep and they would stumble home completely drunk around 3 in the night. They'd give me way too much money as an excuse, which I obviously didn't mind. After a while the dad started messaging me online, first just asking innocent questions, but after a while they became more sexual in nature. I told him I didn't feel comfortable with that, so he stopped. They broke up a while later and the mom started throwing wild parties at their home. I randomly walked by with a friend of mine once and she invited us in and gave us a beer. Me and my friend felt pretty cool. Here we were at a grown-up party, having beers, until the mom came up to us to offer us some tea. We were shocked and declined and left the party quickly after that. I told my parents a couple of years later about all this, after the mom and kids moved, and they were outraged. Apparently they always acted like they were very respectable. Can't believe you said no to free C though. I worked at a daycare center. To be clear, these parents did not seem very normal. Mom had fake inflated Kardashian-sized boobs and butt and was generally very conceited. like almost a stereotype of a person with a body that augmented. She stood out among the other parents who picked up their kids from the daycare after working 12-hour shifts scrubbing floors and doing other blue-collar labor. Large immigrant community. Dad was more down to earth, so it seemed. Younger brother, age 7, told me he was anxious one day. He tended to be a worrywart, so I wasn't surprised, but I asked him why. He says that his dad yells at his mom a lot because she gets drunk, goes out and parties with her friends, and then he has to go and pick her up, which leads to a lot of arguing. I told him that that's really sad and that we would say a prayer for them. It was a Christian day. A week or so later he excitedly told me that the prayer worked and his parents weren't arguing anymore. Well, Mac does say that all things are possible through God, so jot that down. I was only tentatively optimistic about YB's revelation. Older brother, 8, was a completely different personality, a bully to the kids and adults. Never had a positive thing to say. The things he seemed to like were his younger brother, Fortnite and Roblox, like you do. Most of the school year we had butted heads trying to get him to do homework, but towards the end of the year his behavior changed. He would say he was too stupid to do homework and would try to hold his breath to try and commit suicide, in his own words. This seems like a huge red flag, and he eventually broke down and said that his dad was abusive towards him and that his mom says she doesn't like being around him. While he was prone to lying, he was crying, something he never did, and his behavior was like nothing me and my co-workers had never seen. That was my first time calling CPS, and when the next school year started those kids didn't come back. Hopefully the kids are okay. I wasn't a babysitter per se, but my childhood best friend had a very odd family. They would all get naked and hang out around the house, which was adorned with fetishes and carved statues from Aruba and Jamaica. Work in an elementary school. A lot of horrifying, unexpected stuff tends to come up. I handle any behavioral calls, so tend to have a lot of contact with kids who are having trouble self-regulating in school. Sometimes these kids genuinely have a hard time, but often they can't regulate because they're in hyperdrive with what's going on at home. I had a mom tell me, in detail, the sex life between her and her ex. Another parent was arrested for drug trafficking and went to jail for 3 years a week after he'd attended parent-teacher conferences. Another parent got into a fight in the lobby and 911 had to be called. I looked after the neighbor's kid when I was young. They seemed normal enough when they moved in. Kid's parents were always away at work, but her grandmother lived with them and worked from home, so she was always there. The longer they lived there, the clearer it became that I was the only one looking after this kid. They weren't feeding her or paying any sort of attention to her, and grandma didn't work from home so much as play computer solitaire all day. Their dogs pee and crap all over the carpets and they just left it. They let the dogs wander outside unattended, and eventually one got hit by a bus. My mom took her to the vet and she recovered. They let her wander again, now mostly blind and crippled. Eventually she wandered off and didn't come back. They never looked for her. Eventually they moved. They tried to take the appliances with them, ripped the stove, cupboards, toilets, dishwasher, etc. out of the walls and tried to drag them out to their truck. Realtor caught them and there was a big fuss about it. These things were there when they moved in. It's been more than a decade and I still worry about that kid. I babysat for this one family only a couple of times when I was 16. But on the first night they just casually talked about how I needed to call the police if the kid's bio dad turned up at the house. I was then told I would need to barricade us all in their master bathroom and I should call them and their lawyer. Custody battles suck. I was a nanny for a young boy with additional needs. Let's call the parents John and Lisa. John worked for Lisa's parents as they owned a painting company. This company had the family surname as its name. One day I noticed John was home from work early in the painting van, but it had his surname as the company name on the van, not Lisa's parents' surname. I thought it was a funny coincidence that he and Lisa had the same surname, and so I pointed this out. He froze up and looked a little awkward and said, "Oh, that's because Lisa and I are first cousins. They shared the same paternal grandparents and therefore the same surname. They had been together since they were young teenagers. I'm not actually sure if this is legal or not, but it's certainly frowned up here. Depend on your state country. In some it's legal, in others no." Not a deep dark secret, but as someone with 15+ year in childcare It's pretty common for a lot of wealthy parents to prioritize their jobs and themselves over their kids. Kids can sense this and usually develop some sort of unhealthy way to get more attention. The response is usually to throw money at the problem instead of genuinely getting the kid help or re-examining their family structure. It's always so deeply sad to me. A few families I have worked for, I genuinely wondered why they had kids. I understand parents need a break and people have to work, but man, it was so sad. I babysat for a family with 3 wonderful kids. I genuinely did not like to babysit, but these kids were different. They were fun and nice and generally well behaved. We had a standing babysitting night every Saturday. On a couple occasions, I would call the night before if I was sick or couldn't come for whatever reason. When I called, the mom answered and said she understood. She sounded loopy. I didn't really know for sure what drunk sounded like, but that's what I thought was happening. The next night she would call to see why I was late and if I was still coming. She told her kids and husband that I flaked, but she confirmed my suspicions that she was blackout drunk. After a couple times of this happening, they stopped asking me to babysit. I didn't want to confront her about it. I missed her kids a lot and every time I passed by the house, multiple times a day I'd hope that the kids were well. I found out later that the parents were a lot worse than I knew. Drinking, partying, leaving the kids alone a lot. When I told my mom years later about the phone calls, she wasn't remotely surprised. I was giving the 4-year-old a bath and he asked me, "Why don't you touch me like dad does?" That was my first red flag. Eventually the dad would show up at home unannounced to just hang out with me when the kids were napping. I was 18. One day he got a vasectomy and told me if I wanted he could send a couple blank shots at me. A few days later he full on assaulted me. I locked myself in the bedroom and called his wife. She wouldn't believe me. I called my brother and he rushed over with a baseball bat. One family I babysat for was super big in the art world, super successful, had multiple homes, mansions, fancy cars, but the kids were weird. Specifically the older girl, who was about 8. Showed me a jar of baby mice that she had cut out of a pregnant mouse's stomach suspended in formaldehyde sitting on the windowsill in the kitchen. Something about that just did not sit right, and that was the last time I babysat for them. I was a live-in nanny for a local pediatrician's family, stayed with them for around 6 months. The dad moved overseas before his family to make sure everything was settled when they came. So basically, I was the second parent in the home while he was gone. During that time, I grew incredibly close to the mom, in a love-hate way. She opened up about how she has an emotional affair with a mutual friend of hers and her husband's. She would show me the conversation, countless "you're all I wanted" type of messages. I remember her asking about how she can do this while loving her husband. She replied, "I don't love him." In hindsight, I was going through my own relationship drama, so it seemed like a toxic bonding moment. My rose-colored glasses fell off when she admitted she flew across the country to go to a resort with him, all while telling her husband she was on a work trip. For reference, she had 2 toddler twins and a boy entering junior high. Pretty certain her oldest kid knew what was going on. I am a dude, and have had dogs for a large portion of my life. I live somewhere pretty close to a small park with a playground, and I used to walk and play with my dog there frequently, so I would meet this woman who had an adorable daughter quite often. Both she and her daughter liked my dog, so it would often end up with my dog and her daughter playing for a bit while me and the mother were talking about stuff. I am quite laid back and chill, so after talking for some time she asked if I would like to care for her daughter sometime if she was gonna be busy, as she trusted me. As I liked her daughter, I didn't mind. We ended up just playing Mario Kart and chilling on the sofa while I told her stories until she had to go to bed. The mother came home pretty drunk on a few occasions and we ended up sleeping together a few times. What she hadn't told me about was that she had a husband that was working offshore, the kind of work where he would be gone for weeks at a time with no cell reception. Something I kinda found out when I passed her house while walking my dog. Seeing a man working in the garage and the garden several days in a row. I asked the woman the next time I met her if she had met someone new, as I saw some guy at her home. Her face changed immediately and she poured it quietly all out to me. She was miserable with her husband cause he was an alcoholic and was rarely at home cause of work where he always worked overtime. She had fallen for me and thought that I was one of the sweetest men she had ever met, and she would rather be with me than with him. So her nice house, expensive car and all sorts of gadgets were paid by her husband, while I as a lowly middle-range wage man was boning his wife and bonding with his daughter while he was gone. I felt so bad about it, so I told her that we should stay as friends, but that I would keep her secret if she promised to care as well as she could for her daughter, and if crap hits the fan I would look after her daughter. It's been over 1 year now and we still occasionally talk, but I still feel pretty bad about it all. I just hope the daughter doesn't know. What do kids with helicopter parents look like as adults? Friend of mine has a big time helicopter mom. He has never paid taxes. He's 23, his mom handles everything. Recently he moved from his hometown to Austin so he can attempt to be an adult. His mom moved to Austin less than a week later. But other than that he's the most depressed guy I know. That's terrible. I wonder why some parents won't see what they are doing to their kids. Kids with helicopter parents tend to become adults with helicopter parents. No boundaries are set so the parents never take a step back. I saw a post on relationship advice from a guy whose mum was a helicopter parent. He was nearly 30 and still lived with her. She used to check his bank account and turn up to his work to make sure he was there. He'd never had a relationship and wanted advice on moving to new city and going no contact. Does this help? Detached from said helicopter parent. Not mine, but one of my best friends. I'm amazed she hasn't done drugs the moment she moved out of her mom's place, but she's doing well for herself now and is all good. As a parent, the comments in this post depress the heck out of me. I heard the advice early on that it's my job as a parent to slowly work my way out of the picture. Best parenting advice ever. I love my kids and provide well for them and protect them from calamity. But at 9 and 11 they can cook their own meals, when needed, do their own laundry, go to the park on their own. It's only a block away. They can also meet an adult and look them in the eye and shake their hand. They order for themselves in restaurants. We include them in major family decisions. Their opinions are listened to and respected. They're free to make their own mistakes and do. It's tough. It's brutal. I worry like heck every single time they get on their bike and drive down the driveway. But we prepared them. They wear a helmet and know the rules. Now I got to back the F off. For them. I'd love to have my kids need me forever. But that's what pets are for. Not children. It's your job to slowly work your way out of the picture. Brutal, but that's love. You beat the parenting game. Honestly, just an anxious mess. Every job I've had I've been constantly afraid I'll mess something up and be a disappointment. It's honestly paralyzing. Eventually when I got married I just kind of gave up on having a career and became a housewife. Still constantly anxious I don't measure up, but at least my husband is willing to reassure me. Once you realize people can survive being disappointed and it doesn't really matter in the end, you'll really free yourself. I can answer this. I'm scared of my parents, specifically my dad. I'm the youngest in my family and grew up conditioned to always be a delicate little flower who had to be protected at all costs. As I grew older and by them being particularly strict about what I could or couldn't do, my adult brain registered the couldn't do's as threats to my safety. It's caused me a lot of issues. Here's a list. I have to separate personas around people. When I'm with friends, I swear a lot. I joke around. I deliberately try to pee them off for a laugh. I'm not afraid to admit I enjoy playing video games or watch cartoons. Near my parents, I'm as quiet as a mouse. Even when I do speak near them I don't swear or try anything to bother them. I can't bring myself to update my social media where my parents can see it because I'm frightened they'll come in and tell me I have a bad opinion or I should delete my posts. If something minor is even put up, it gets taken down. As a result of being scared of my dad, I developed a severe anxiety disorder revolving around riding in his car as a passenger. If I'm carsick, he'll be mad, and that happens frequently. I'm getting better at not having a panic attack in his car. Gradually, they are so deluded in seeing me as a delicate little flower that they fail to encourage or acknowledge my real interest in playing video games, like it's embarrassing to them. I do my best not to bother them by playing my games very discreetly. It's impolite to be loud. I listen to the TV at the lowest volume. I've trained myself to burp by breathing it out through my nose so it's silent. People around me can belch loudly if they wanted. I don't know how to anymore. If I accidentally make any sort of unsavory sound, I have to apologize profusely. I'm afraid of the outside world at dark, even at twilight. I was forbidden from riding a train home at 5 p.m. to protect me from scary people. But now, I'm always frightened. It makes it difficult to go out in public at night without constantly being on edge. It's made people who are just having fun drinking with friends look like monsters who intend to kill me instead. I'm too anxious to drink because I don't want to disappoint my parents, and all drunk people are dangerous and intend to hurt you. I'm seeing a psychiatrist and a psychologist, and both of them told me my mental health will improve drastically when I move out. They say right now, I am an independent adult, but I'm very much a robot conditioned at a young age to stay safe, to the point of never really experiencing the world and learning to make mistakes, so as a result I am always anxious and terrified of disappointing my parents. My best friend grew up with controlling helicopter parents, and there's a lot of things she never learned because they never taught her. My husband and I have been teaching her basic financial literacy because her parents never helped her build credit, never let her have her own bank account, never let her apply for a credit card. They controlled everything, so she had to unlearn a mindset of spending any money you do have on hand ASAP. She also struggled with honesty. In her household, lying was second nature. The best way to get out of any problem was to lie. This caused a lot of problems for her because she would lie to fix things, cover things, and get out of things in her other relationship. That took a long time and a few destroyed relationships to really unlearn. She also struggles with impulse control. She's much better now, but she used to make a lot of bad choices simply because she could. She wouldn't stop to think through if it was a good idea or not. We're in our late 20s and my husband and I have served as a lot of her safety net and support over the years. Her relationship with her parents and herself have gotten way healthier, so now she's living on her own, supporting herself, and making smarter choices, but oof, those early 20s were a rough time. It sounds like she is very lucky to have friends like you who are willing to be that bridge, so that she's not just flung into the world with no help whatsoever. Unwilling, unable to make decisions. I didn't do that because nobody directed me to. Doesn't take a single step without getting specific approval from someone. No problem solving ability whatsoever. Just waits around to be told exactly what to do. Anxiously runs around till someone tells what to do. Welp, at least that's what it like in my case. LOL. I know several graduates of a high-end private preparatory high school who have said that, by age 30, they attended more funerals than weddings for their former classmates because the suicide rate was so high. They all had helicopter parents and took any sort of setback in their lives as a failure because they lacked any sort of coping skills. Reminds me of the movie, Dead Poets Society. One of my cousins had the worst helicopter parents. Her mother took her to school and for the entire year, waited outside the classroom door while class was in session. The next year she volunteered as a teacher's assistant for baby's class. This went on until baby graduated high school and applied for college, out of town. Mom and dad sold their house and bought a new one in the town where baby was going to college. Twice. They did this twice. Baby is a well-adjusted young lady. She's lovely, has a college degree and is in training to become a helicopter pilot. I'm not even kidding. The helicopter baby is becoming a helicopter pilot. The best outcome. My ex has an overly doting mother. He couldn't crisis manage, troubleshoot or handle anything on his own. He also only trusted her advice. I suggested something. He refused. She suggested the same thing and he obliged. He lacked motivation to do better for himself, look for a better job, get our own place, etc. because his mom always took care of him financially. He had no faith in his abilities or talent because he never had the chance to prove to himself he could handle anything. Whoa, I think we had the same ex. It's crazy how often this seems to happen. Anxious, suffocated, Helicopter parents have this unrealistic expectations but refuses to accept that their children are now adults. I'm 23. Last year I rented an apartment near work. I could finally breathe properly, but still I have to text her when I step out of the unit, when I reached the office, when my shift is done and when I finally got home. If I forgot to text, or if my message didn't go through, she won't stop calling me until I answer. The signal in my apartment is poor, so I really have to go outside to get a single bar. One time she kept calling me but I was asleep, and since there's almost no signal then I'm not receiving any of her calls. When I finally went out, that's when my phone rang. She told me she's already on her way to my workplace just because I didn't answer her calls. Now my hand shakes and my heart always drops when I hear a text or call, even if it's not from her. That's how my mother is affecting me. I had one working for me at an architecture firm as an intern. Gave her work that was slightly challenging for someone starting out, where she had to figure some things out on her own. Failed miserably, resorted to giving her red lines to pick up, literally a printout of a drawing with red pen showing what needed to be changed. Move this wall over 8 inches, fix this typo, etc. She finished about half of the changes and brought it back done. I went back and told her the way to track her work was to go over the red marks with a highlighter as she finished each change, to make sure she picked it all up. Still brought it back partly done, but with highlights indicating she had done all of it. Couldn't understand why that was a problem. She wasn't dumb, just couldn't fathom that no one would be picking up after her, or that errors in the drawings could cost tens of thousands of dollars in lost time and materials down the line. It all fell into place for me the second day, when she drove up in a new car her parents had bought for her. She had been driving it for a month. I had been thinking of getting a similar car, so I asked her what she thought of it. Was it designed well? Were there any annoying features? All she could tell me was that the brakes were sticky. I kind of gave up on her after that. If she had been inexperienced but wanted to learn and asked questions and made an effort to get things right, I would have put in the effort to teach her. Oh man, I supervised someone like that a while ago. She wasn't stupid, but her quality of work was terrible and full of errors. Nothing we could say was effective in getting her to turn in error-free work. No idea if she had helicopter parents, though. 28 years old with highly abusive helicopter mom. Up until she died 4 years ago my life was an anxious mess. I never had to think for myself as a kid since she was the one always deciding who I got to hang out with or what my future should look like. I slowly started rebelling when I left for college 1,000 kilometers away, but I didn't free myself from her grip until she died. I have absolutely no ambitions. I finished college and studied what she wanted me to, but I have zero interest in my career and could not care less about continuing my education. I'm a doctor, so this should be important, but I just don't care. I am super lazy. I procrastinate a lot. I was used from a young age to have her breathing down my neck making sure I got stuff done. So now that she's gone I see no reason to make the effort. I have a really hard time making decisions. I'll get really anxious and I almost always need someone else to help or validate me. I also get very anxious when I have to turn someone down, tell someone something that's bothering me, or just stand up for myself in general. This has been an issue with my so. This could be because of her abuse and not because of her helicoptering though. I also have a really hard time being okay with disappointing people. My mom would lose her crap if I failed her. She would get really hurtful and sometimes she would resort to physical violence. I will do stuff I don't want to just to avoid feeling I'll let someone down. This is a hard one because not only have I done projects or chores I didn't want to, I have also done sexual things with partners I did not feel comfortable with just to avoid them thinking I am not good enough. Working on this though. Lastly, because my mom was so overbearing, when I finally left for college I realized the best way to get her off my back was to lie. I would lie to her all the time, about my grades, me friends, the people I dated. If I thought that something would bother her just a little bit, I lied. Now I still struggle with this. I lie to my dad, my friends and my so. Not big bad lies like ripping them off or cheating or whatever, but I will find myself continually sugarcoating things, leaving important details out or just right out inventing things. For example, I lost my wallet a few weeks ago because I was goofing around, but I told my so and my dad that I had been robbed just so I didn't have to hear them tell me I should be more careful. I don't even plan on lying. It comes out on its own and then I would look bad if I corrected myself. See, all in all my life is pretty good now. I have a loving so. We just bought an apartment and I have a steady job. But I always look at other people with their own dreams and ambitions and wonder how that must feel. I just float through life with no real goal except getting my paycheck so I can buy something, go out to eat, get a present for myself. Buy something, go out to eat, get a present is an ambition. Ambitions don't have to be big. I give you permission to have small ambitions. For me, ambition has been mostly a learned thing. My small ambitions have slowly gotten bigger as I've built success with the small things. My goal for this year is to adopt a dog, my biggest goal yet. My cousin is a nervous ball of wax. Despite an Ivy League undergrad and a law degree from Cardozo that my uncle and aunt paid for and pushed him on for the first 25 years of his life, he makes less money than a Pandora employee. Yep, even as a lawyer he can't get a decent firm associate position because he's a nervous mess. He is deeply closeted and would feel a lot better if he just admitted he was gay and sucked a dong now and then. Instead he's hiding under the guise of Orthodox Judaism and wondering why every religious friend of his is married with 3-5 kids apiece by the time they're 32. He should watch an awesome TV series called Shtisel, about an ultra of this guy with a controlling father who struggles his way to his own choices. It just might, maybe, inspire him to seek some autonomy. Actually anyone should watch it. There's a lot more to it than I described but don't want to spoil things. There were 2 seasons. Meant to be filming 3 now but, you know, sigh. I dated a girl who was an only child and had a helicopter mom. She couldn't make decisions, had to talk to her mom daily, before cell phones, and was pretty much a narcissist. She cheated on me. I guess her mom told her to always look for something better. We talked once about 20 years later on Facebook. She was still single and after about 3 back and forth updates she made some crappy comment about my wife, whom she had never met, so I blocked her immediately. She got married around age 45 I guess because her last name was changed on LinkedIn. What is funny is that her married name is something horrible, like Foka. Poor guy. Her married name is something horrible, like Foka. I met them once. My wife has helicopter parents and I constantly have to argue with them. We are in our mid-30s. When we visit they plan our itinerary to the 15-minute block. Stopping for lunch as a family is not allowed unless previously approved. They have tentacles that reach out though churches to check on us. When my daughter was born a stranger to us came up to us in a restaurant, picked up our newborn and walked away with her. I had to chase her down. She told me my wife's mother had told her to do so. She was over 1,000 miles away. We attended their church once. Again, we are in NC and they were in Maine. A strange family came up and questioned why my wife uses a breast pump and told her it makes her less of a mother. There is no way they could have known without someone telling them. My wife's siblings are all struggling. Can't do anything for themselves. I own their cars and they make payments to me. I pay for their car insurance. During one medical emergency while I was at work the parents called their friends at church to go get my daughter and no one called me. When I finally heard from my wife we didn't know where my child was. Grandma had control. Sounds like you should have pressed charges. That was kidnapping. I dated a guy like this. I was 49 years old. He was 57. He resented his parents. Always complained about them. He could not make decisions, so never made one. It was up to me to make all the dating plans. He was helpless in that he had no life skills. He was laid off from his mechanical engineering job and could no longer afford rent. So I took pity on him and let him move in with me. He could not cook or clean and expected me to do all that work for him. Even after all that, he started resenting me, probably because he was so dependent on me. I kicked him out and he's now living with his parents. That was 4 years ago and he's still there, still resenting them. Child free and an absolute freak up and failure. Still trying to make up for lost time of my adolescence and I'm almost 30. I'd rather be dead some days. Thanks for asking. Bruh, same. I think I might want kids someday, but I'm so worried that I'll mess them up the same way that my parents messed up my brother and me. I'm almost 30 and I still feel like a scared little kid. Frick. Had a helicopter mom. I moved away for college. I had a tear off calendar that I made for the last 6 months before college. Safe to say college was amazing. Drank like a fish. Did lots of drugs. Almost didn't make it through college. Anyways, somehow made it through residency, so my mom got what she wanted in the end, I guess. But this was also my own choice because I love medicine. I've interviewed them for work. I will not likely ever hire one. When they ask for their parents to join the interview, yes, they do that. I know a couple things. First, they will not have any idea what confidential means for our corporate info. Mom and dad will get it all, including client information. Second, they will not be reliable to do anything at all on their own. They will have to be walked through everything. In short, they tend to be extremely unhireable for the roles I interview them for. The technical term is disasters, I think. They are often utterly incompetent at life, both personally and professionally. Adults with helicopter parents. Know a few. They moved away to college and parents followed and moved where they moved and had them move in with them. Mid-20s and parents run their lives same as when they were teenagers. Looks in mirror. Pretty dang sexy if I do say so myself. JK. All that middle school and high school awkward, it's worse in college. When I was 18 I just left. They didn't have legal guardianship. They couldn't say crap. Things were rocky for a couple of years, but so worth the freedom. As I got married and had kids, they tried to be controlling over them and my spouse, and I set extremely firm boundaries and made it clear that they would never see any of us again if they played that game with me. I was about 2 seconds away from filing a restraining order when they finally got the message. Unfortunately, I have to use their tactics against them and threaten extreme things in order to get them out of our personal lives. The one thing I took away from all of that is, with people like that, you have to be willing to fight and accept that you may very well have to cut them completely out of your life. Here's a tip. You have to train your helicopter mom. Mine wasn't anywhere near as bad as some of these posts. She's a pretty good mom, but she called all the time in college. Like every day. Ultimately, I jokingly said the opposite of what she wanted to hear. Mom, what are doing? Me nothing. Is $100 a decent price for an 8-ball of coke? Mom, what are doing? Me nothing. Is viral meningitis super contagious? Mom, what are doing? Me just drugs. She knew I was joking, but eventually, she called less because I wasn't giving her the feedback she wanted. My sisters didn't do this. They still get called every day. Kids with helicopter parents can grow to become jaded because of so many missed opportunities. Granted, some things they may have missed out or may have very well saved their lives, but there is still that regret. It's important to create some distance as you grow up if you find yourself under this type of roof, not simply to get away from your parents but to grow as a person. You'll get older and your parents won't always be there to make every decision for you. It is important to learn how to steer the rudder under normal circumstances because it does not take a lot of time before the tides change. My cousin works as a HR person, so she is responsible for much of the first interviews for new hires. More than a few times people will bring a parent with them for the interview. We are not talking about teens, we are talking about fully grown individuals attempting to get a full-time career. It's kinda sad. This happened to me. Mum stays in the lobby while a 25-year-old child interviews. I once had a parent call me to lobby on behalf of their child. I did not hire them. Hello, helicopter parent child here. I kinda went wild when I got away from them. Not completely off the shoots doing drugs, party every night wild, but I go to a lot of parties, smoke pot, it's legal here, and skateboard. All things my parents wouldn't let me do. I have read it now, which I couldn't even think of getting back in the day. It's probably not wild to your standards, but to me I would be grounded for the rest of my life if my parents knew about this stuff. I guess I do it to catch up on all the stuff I couldn't do when I was younger. I feel free, my mans. Still trying to get my kid to step up. We hover, but encourage him to go out and do dumb things, cause that's the only way you learn how to manage dumb things. He's 18. Hey, can I go out with my friends? You are 18. A high school graduate and have a full-time job. Why are you asking me? Don't forget to take your meds and remember that if you stay out too late you'll pay for it tomorrow. Have fun. This isn't helicopter. This is healthy parenting. Encouraging them to make mistakes and learn from those themselves. Helipads. Parents just continue to use them if the child didn't cut them off. Worst case scenario, they live with their parents and are unemployed. Their looks are predominated by indecisiveness, a slighter thinner or bigger build, and usually with a hobby that seems inexpensive at first, but gradually becomes unbearable. They also end relationships and friendships based on their parents' decisions. If they had cut off their parents, then they are almost a normal adult, almost because their parents keep pestering their life every day till they die. But what is beautiful about them is that they will usually never do what their parents did. It never stops. You can never truly feel free or independent. Even when you are making close to 800 or 1000 a week, are successful, have your own things going on, etc. It never stops. There's always this weird thing. I am not sure if it's overprotective, it's just odd. Failure to launch syndrome is something I mainly work with in my clients as a therapist. Lots of avoidance of conflict, not able to do basic life skills, executive functioning defects, and parents still overly involved in their lives well into adulthood. Parents of Reddit, why are you disappointed in your adult child? He is 24 years old and has a full-blown addiction that started in the last 6 months. He was fired from the job he got at 18 because he was high and manic. Sidebar: his manager was the one that introduced him to M. Since then he has dedicated his time to either finding or using M. He has been arrested 3 times, spent 30 days in jail, and continues to use even though he is on probation. He is angry because we will not allow him to live with us while he is using. He is now homeless. He broke into our house and stole some of his father's sports memorabilia to support his habit. Some of it is not replaceable and very sentimental. He is a shell of the human we knew 6 months ago, both figurative and literally. He cannot hold a normal conversation and is constantly twitching. We have offered to get him help, but he is convinced that the drugs have set him free and we all are living in a delusional world where we have to work and conform to society. It is killing us. On the other hand, our daughter, 23, just graduated college in June with a paralegal degree and has decided to go to law school. She is afraid to celebrate her success because she doesn't want to make him feel bad or upset him, but frick him for taking that away from her. Pathological liar. 33 years old and he would rather walk 10 miles to tell a lie than to stand still and tell the truth. His ex-wives all found out the same thing. My son is 25 and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at around 15 years old, maybe younger. After he became too old and too big for me to manage his meds, he refused to take them, and his life has been a roller coaster of disasters ever since. Between prison time, juvie and adult, bad decisions, suicidal ideation, drug use, fathering 2 children he doesn't see, same mom, and insisting on making up reasons to not speak to Emmy. I'm done, because honestly there's nothing I can do for him. At this point I'm just waiting to get a phone call on where I need to go to identify the body. As someone with a bipolar, I feel for you. He went off his meds once for almost 2 months and it was the scariest and most painful time in my life. I can't imagine what you feel. Please accept a hug from a stranger. Thanks for the gold. It's my first. He's 20 and refuses to go to college or get a job. He lives with his mom, so all I can do is talk to him about it. I fear for his future. Like, we, his parents, aren't immortal and he doesn't seem to have self-preservation skills. I'm not disappointed in my 18-year-old, but I sure wish I knew how to activate him. He graduated in May, has no desire to go to college and no real aspirations at all. He's pretty much been in his room on his phone since. He's struggled for many years with anxiety, which we're treating, and I know a lot of things are difficult for him, but man, I wish I knew how to get him excited about something, anything, whether it's a job or a hobby or a plan or whatever. My son is 24 and, by some standards, a disappointment. He has a degree and no job. He struggles with motivation, and his sleep patterns are terrible. I don't think he has a plan to move forward with his life. Earlier in the year, my husband, his dad, was diagnosed with cancer. I thank God every day for my slacker son. He is so kind. Every time he makes dinner because I know you must be tired, or comes and gives me a hug when I get home from work, makes it possible for me to keep going. It sounds like he's got a bit of depression. I'd keep an eye out and see what you can do. I may be wrong, but it's worth confirming or otherwise. He's 42, lives with his dad, is 6 years into a 2-year degree, and has gone through 4 decent cars in the last 6 months. His dad bought the cars and he trashed them. He's also threatened physical abuse to his dad. He disowned his older sister over a political argument on Facebook. She said, "I'm leaving this discussion before we say things we'll regret." And he tried to forbid it, saying if she left she was disrespecting him and was no longer related to him. I think at one point someone got to figure it out that he doesn't know how to drive. Really, it's like, just drive normally and don't hit anything. 16-year-old kids can do it. I'm disappointed in my son because he is too much like me. He's a solid introvert who is afraid to ask for help and doesn't want to bother people, even with very legitimate requests. He is an expert procrastinator. I remember being that age and being so much like that. I'm not sure how I got through university, but I've been a successful engineer for 30 years, so I've still got a lot of hope for him. Also, both my kids vape smoke. We've been anti-smokers for all our adult lives and I'm sad to see them choose to do something negative like that. They both want to quit, but it's a tough road. For those who don't have disappointing adult children, I can always be yours. Same. I'll call to beg for money and everything. He is 31 and has been a hardcore addict, since age 15. He has put us through heck. I'm disappointed and we are estranged, but he is still my son and I love him. Something about your comment resonated with me a lot and has me tearing up over here. I'm lucky to have a great relationship with my parents but want to send you an internet hug. 3. My ex-husband was the son that my parents wanted their actual son to be. So they'll P that my brother isn't like him and they'll P that I divorced him. Double whammy. Never mind that we just fundamentally did not work as a couple. They basically see it as me stealing away their chance at having the perfect child in a son-in-law. Oh well. I cannot imagine how freaking annoying it must be to constantly be asked why you broke it off with someone. Click because, for some reason, I was looking to hate myself more. Found fewer reasons for that. Surprisingly, well played, Reddit. Same. I have been having issues feeling that I have disappointed my parents. This thread gave me a lot of perspective and made me feel that I'm not all that much of a screw up yet. He's a deadbeat dad for his first daughter, which means I can't see my first granddaughter anymore. Has been in and out of jail since the age of 11. Is a multiple offense convicted felon as an adult who will steal from anyone, myself and his mother included, and has threatened to have most of his family members killed. He is known to carry stolen firearms and frequently uses his brother's name to try to avoid being caught. He's a drug addict, living with a drug addicted girl, and they have now had 2 more children together, both of whom suffer from the effects of their parents' drug addictions. Fetal drug syndrome. My mum's disappointed that I left a £33,000 a year job for a £28,000 job because I had 2 mental breakdowns. Even though everything is now perfect, sometimes we just have to get on with it. Your mental health is worth way more than £5k a year. As long as you have enough to get by, you made the right call. I'm still not sure what my parents think of me. I was the promised child who got 99th percentile on aptitude tests in kindergarten, aced tests, memorized the presidents by age 4, at my dad's insistence, and ended up just blundering my way through school because what started as a bad habit of not doing homework eventually amalgamated into depression-driven apathy about education. I dropped out of college and I've spent more of my time in therapy learning how to be a good person and be happy, which does make my mom happy, but I can feel my entire extended family's disappointment in me that I chose to work an 8-5 job and just live in an apartment with my cat. On the bright side, I'm more confident in my life choices than I ever have been and wouldn't trade the positive mindset I've been working so hard on for any amount of work discipline. OHH, good timing. I have to be semi-vague but hopefully you get the gist. My middle daughter is 19 but we've had issues her entire life. I strongly suspect BPD narcissism. Currently her infant child has been removed from her care by CPS for multiple reasons, notably her erratic behavior she showed and continues to show and also heavy marijuana use. We suspect other drugs at play but have zero proof. Instead of cooperating to get her child back, she has fought kicking and screaming every step of the way, making it much harder than necessary. At the same time blaming her mother and vilifying her to the point that she has lied to CPS in an attempt to have them remove her 4-year-old sister from her mother's care. Calling old friends and family, giving them a hugely false story in an attempt to alienate her mother and have zero friends and help. It's a giant mess she's created and refuses to take any blame or acknowledge that she's the issue at all. The weed could be making it worse, as I learned a while back in Reddit. Psychosis and weed don't mix. I'm in the middle of becoming estranged from my parents. They don't approve of how I'm raising my sons, and they can't even bring themselves to be around them. Our last attempt at a family vacation left my sisters yelling at my parents, and then storming off. Their complaint is that I don't have any boundaries for the kids. I do have boundaries, they just aren't the same as my dad had when I was growing up. He was a hard ass with major anger issues. He threw me up a stairwell once when I left my boots behind at a park. Due to living in that household, I'm attempting to let my kids grow up knowing that making mistakes is part of life. You just have to learn from it. In any event, my children are monsters and he can't get over that, so I'm about to cut him and my stepmom out of our lives. Hits her husband, calls him worthless and leaves him alone with the baby for days without telling him she's going anywhere. He will come home from work and she's gone for 3 days in a 5-star hotel with a spa treatment. It's awful. My son always viewed me only as a milking cow. He doesn't care about anything but his own happiness and even refuses to talk to me. If it's still like this when he turns 2, I'm done with the entire affair. I like this one. Made me smile. My mom held getting a degree as one of the pinnacle achievements you can do because it was such a big deal to her going back to school and getting her degree in her 40s. As someone who works in IT, I dropped out about a year into school and haven't looked back. That was 10 years ago. I hid that I dropped out for many years before I actually told her. She was disappointed, but in my opinion, the astronomical cost of a degree does not have a good ROI, and in IT, I've worked up to a very high salary level without one. Certifications, mentors, learning on the job and at home. To me, a 4-year degree doesn't make much logical sense in a fast-moving field like this one. My 19-year-old daughter failed out in her first semester of college. Not a big deal. Sometimes freshmen get overwhelmed and don't do so hot in their classes. My daughter, however, just decided to not show up to the classes that weren't theater related. So she failed math and English, which she could have aced. Now, had she owned up to this, there would have been little issue. Lesson learned. Do better on probation and pass the classes next semester. What she did do was just not register for classes for the next semester and try her luck at living in the dorms, illegally. Somehow it took the college 3 months to catch up with her. She finally fessed up, in March. By that time, she had been trespassing at the college for those 3 months. We had to beg the college to not throw her into prison. We were literally on the phone with college officials for an hour begging them to just let her come home. She screwed up, but she's learned her lesson. Luckily, if you can call it that, her grandmother rushed to her rescue and paid off her outstanding balance on her bill. $6,000 for the 3 months she lived on campus, boarding and food card. Her grandmother, my mom, then proceeded to tell my daughter she never had to return to us. We were evil people and she would protect her from the likes of us. My daughter, who used to call me every night and called me anytime she had problems, cut all ties with us because facing her responsibilities wasn't a requirement anymore. We tried calling her, tried telling her we weren't angry and to just come home. Nothing doing. We would have been angry, but we would have worked it out. Instead, we became the bad guys in her fairy tale, and for the past 5 months she's gone on shopping sprees, goofed off and had the time of her life. I've seen her twice since it all happened. Both times she treated me like an evil monster. Both times I went home in tears, despising my mother more and more. My daughter is going back to school tomorrow like nothing ever happened. My B of a mom is paying for it. You might be thinking, be grateful she's footing the bill. The problem with that is my oldest daughter has worked her butt off to get her degree, and my mom refused to help her because she's bisexual. She's doing this to get back at her for embarrassing her in front of her church. I refused to let the younger daughter get help from her because of this in the past, so my younger daughter also stabbed her older sister in the back by doing this. I'm so very disappointed in the entitled brat my daughter has become, and if I ever see my be of a mother again, I'll wring her fat neck, right in front of all those Christians in her church. Not mine but my brother's. My nephews are mama's boys who are in their late 20s early 30s and still live at home. They went away to college and couldn't hack it for more than a year or two before moving back home. Any girl they date has to have mommy's approval or they dump her. One girl was of the wrong religion and their mom, my sil, wouldn't permit her in the house. I'm in my 30s and unmarried. My mum worries every time I take solo holidays. I'm sure she wishes I had a husband to go along. My son is 23. He is fat, unmotivated, and lazy. He's approaching his 6th year of university and it looks like he still has 2-3 more years to go. He is working at a dead-end job with no benefits and refuses to leave. He is constantly spending all his time and money on video games and drugs. Every time I see him at home, he's either on his computer playing games, on the couch watching TV eating Cheetos, or high as a kite. He is literally wasting his life away, but it seems like he doesn't realize how bad it is getting. He doesn't have much friends, only a few druggies, and has never been in a relationship. I think he's an incel. It worries me that if he keeps this up, he'll end up a sad, pathetic loser. I have tried many times to have him clean up his life, but he doesn't listen. I am disappointed. My aunt and I are very close. I'm like her pseudo daughter after my mom and I became distant. Anti-vax mom. I can answer for her and her biological children. Her daughter is 21, lives with a bunch of druggies and sells pot out of their rented home. The police regularly show up due to the persistent smoke clouds surrounding the house. She works a full-time job at some meat processing facility, but she's got no drive and doesn't really know how money works. She's got her car impounded after she got arrested for possession. The impound lot sold her car after she couldn't pay. My aunt paid for a brand new car and she's supposed to be paying her back every week, but my aunt has never seen a cent. She owes her $27,000 in car payments, and that is not including bail money, at least 50 grand. My aunt is an electrical engineer and makes decent money, but she will be in debt for the rest of her life because of her daughter's mistakes. I'm a welder, and I've been secretly saving 50% of my paycheck every month to be able to pay off her debts for her. I have so much hope that her daughter will come around. Hey, that's awesome of you to do that though. It sucks to hear about her daughter, but at least you guys have a solid relationship and she appreciates you. I want to give a reverse perspective. I have a high school age boy, one of 3 kids, who sometimes jokes that he's disappointing us and that he's kind of a loser. And I feel so awful when he says things like that. If you feel like that, I want you to know that for the overwhelming majority of you, your parents love you and care about you and are not disappointed in you at all. They just want you to see all the goodness and possibilities in yourself that they see, so that you can be the happiest version of yourself that you can be. You don't need to be some kind of super achiever. You just need to find something, or things, that spark some kind of joy for you. I'm not. Life is hard and she had dealt with a lot. She may not be fully independent yet, but she's working on it. I see her effort and I'm proud of her for it. Maybe I could be disappointed she didn't do more stupid stuff when she was young, but I'm just glad she didn't end up like me. ETA, I'm not in a bad place now, but I'm sure as heck lucky to have gotten here and not ended up dead in a ditch somewhere. If my mom was on Reddit, this is what I imagine her saying about me. I never got in trouble or did stupid stuff growing up, but the past couple years have been rough. But she has been there every day for me. Just know that your daughter appreciates you being there for her and supporting her. I feel petty after reading others' posts. I've got a 20-year-old son who is smart, kind, and very academically motivated but is a slob. I'm talking about gross stuff like toenails left on his desk, wads of hair stuck to the shower wall. He doesn't shower for days, and his room smells like there is a dead prostitute under the heaping mounds of dirty laundry. I raised him, so I guess ultimately the onus is on me. Somewhere in the world, it's some kid who secretly knows his parents' Reddit handle and is having the most emotional devastation. I took an easy job. They had high expectations and pushed hard for me to be the best of the best at everything I can, but won't if I'm not forced. Having no work-related pressure or stress is much nicer for me, but I'm somewhat poor and relatively uninfluential. Disappointed does not even begin to cover it. I feel like I've lost my daughter this year. She's been dating a guy for about 3 years, off and on. Well, early this year they broke up. She started seeing someone new and fell head over heels for him. And my wife and I quickly fell in love with him too. Things were going great. Then the ex started whispering in her ear again. Next thing you know, she feels like God is telling her something is wrong. The ex likes to use religion to manipulate her. Before you know it, her and the new guy break up. Me, my wife, and the new guy are all devastated. She goes back to the manipulative little dong. All her friends stop hanging out with her because none of them can stand dong either. It seems she becomes super religious when she's with him. I hate that I can't talk to her and feel like I've lost her because of this relationship she's addicted to, where she is constantly mistreated and made to feel like the bad guy. TLDR. I hate that I can't talk to her and feel like I've lost her because of this relationship she's addicted to, where she is constantly mistreated and made to feel like the bad guy and won't listen to anybody about. I feel all you guys' pain. My son is 32. He is just undermotivated, no matter how hard I try, but I know there is a fine line between motivating and being so hard on him he goes the exact opposite way I hope he will. I'm a widow and we live together. Always have. He is underemployed and loves the video games. Sadly, the apple didn't fall too far from the lazy tree. I have had a good job for 30 years and I hope he can find a way. He has finally started to feel the pinch of my one main income and how it limits our lives. He is trying and I just have to support him and give him positive reinforcement until he gets to a good place. Neither one of us dates and prefer to stay home and partake in relaxation. But I would maybe like to have a grandbaby one day, but then some days figure why bring a kid into this world. Good luck to us all. He isn't even looking for a job or to get out of the house. He just eats my food without paying a penny and watches TV or plays all day. 2-year-olds are so entitled. You guys ever heard of Rich Baumhammer's? He went on a spree killing in Pittsburgh in 2000, targeting Jews and immigrants. Ironically, he was a lawyer who specialized in cases of fighting illegal immigration. His parents would come into the store I worked about once a week. They were both disturbingly quiet people. Very soft spoken, and they both always looked down at the ground when they would speak with anyone. I can't imagine what it's like to be Richard's parents. I feel terrible that their child is a psychopath and it's public knowledge. This thread just sent me spiraling down the depression rabbit hole and makes me never want to show up to another family function again. Sincerely, someone else's disappointment. Not a parent but the child. My parents are disappointed in me because I basically failed out of college UK after demonstrating time and time again that I lack the direction, drive, foresight, and discipline to do well on my A-levels. My results came back today, Ed, and they're seriously off. We'll be having a long discussion on my plan going forwards, but I can tell they've lost their faith in me. I can't blame them. I don't have faith in me either. I can elaborate if anyone cares, but I think I'll leave it here for now. Redditors who grew up with strict parents, what was the craziest rule or punishment you had to deal with? When I was in first grade, I had a writing homework assignment. My dad used to be weird about me erasing, because he wanted me to do it right the first time. I ended up erasing a lot on this homework and my dad took the paper from me, ripped it in half and told me to start over. Turns out it was the last sheet of paper in the entire house, and I don't remember why, but for some reason we couldn't go and buy more paper that night. So ironically, I ended having to completely erase an old homework assignment in order to have a sheet of paper to start over on. I'm 22 now and still give him crap about this. As one should. The word disgusting was banned and could have been considered just as bad as saying frick. We weren't allowed to close doors unless we were in the bathroom. We weren't allowed to watch Cartoon Network because it was garbage. They actually put a parental lock on Cartoon Network. The worst punishment was one time they decided that we were such bad kids, my sister was like 14, I was 12ish, that they took everything we owned and bagged it up into garbage bags and made us carry them out to a burn pile, and they burnt everything we owned. All of my childhood memorabilia, pictures, clothes, diaries, everything. Burnt it all. Fricked up. When it was done burning the next day or so later, my sister and I looked through the ashes and all that was left were 2 silver rings of hers that we cleaned off and kept. Crazy crap. I once got beaten and locked in the basement because my hands were literally not large enough to play a certain piano piece. I couldn't play an octave separation yet. Before you ask, yes, I am Asian. French guy here. I did violin. My brother piano. Although we enjoyed it at first, our love for music died out when passion was met with fear. I was not allowed to use public restrooms. I ruined our Disney trip because of how many times we had to go back to the hotel not on site when I was 6. And I quite honestly had accidents when I was far too old to do so because my parents had my teachers reporting bathroom use to them too. There was no place I could safely use the restroom other than home without getting into trouble. Finally I got to use public restrooms without punishment when I freaking went to college. No, I'm not kidding. But I got pretty good at hiding restroom use in high school because the high school refused to report it to my parents. Why did none of these teachers spot the abuse? How? My parents once grounded me for 2 years for getting a B on my report card. Took everything out of my room besides the bed, and I wasn't allowed to do anything with friends. A year and a half into it I asked if I could be ungrounded, and at that point they had actually forgotten what they grounded me for, but refused because I must have done something bad if they grounded me. Also they refused to let me stay up past 8 PM, even in high school. When you're being punished without reason, it's not punishment anymore. When I was in preschool, 1993, there was a girl who wasn't allowed to play outside because she'd get her dress dirty. Thankfully the staff always had a change of play clothes for her because F that. I brought play clothes to my cousin's graduation party. I said hi to all the adults and chatted for a while, then put my shorts and t-shirt on to defend my badminton title. I am 33. When I was a kid, I had dysgraphia, but my parents didn't know that, so I used to take time to do my homework. My mom would threaten to throw my homework out the window if I wasn't done by a certain time. I lived in an apartment block and this window was into a service shaft. I too had undiagnosed dysgraphia for years. I remember spending hours redoing my homework because it wasn't neat enough. When I was in elementary school at about 6 years old, I used to have accidents because my bladder was too small. My mom would punch me in the bladder when I got home to make me pee myself and make fun of me when I did. I still have issues and it turns out that my bladder and uterus is fricked up from a genetic disease. That is awful. But now you have a cool secret handshake to show your mom every time you visit her in her underfunded old age home. No talking at the dinner table other than the occasional "do you want some more of" or "please pass the." We could not talk about anything at all. No small idle chat was allowed. First time you did it, you got yelled at. Second time was a whooping and then sent to your room until the next day without the rest of your meal. I make it a point now with my kids to chat up a storm each and every meal. You could earn a full-on butt whooping for uttering any of the following: "shut up," "but," accusing someone of lying for any reason. We were not permitted to use the words liar, liar, lying. Instead we had to say "that's not the truth," or "that doesn't sound right," or any other phraseology that wasn't some iteration of the word lie. I can relate. My siblings and I weren't able to say "boring" without my mom freaking out. Not that crazy, just something that stuck with me, since I generally consider my parents to be good caring parents, mainly just overprotective. But when I was 15, I got really depressed and kinda shut down academically and socially. My parents didn't know what to do with me. At one point, they ran out of ways to ground me and my life was consequently made up of just going to school and coming home and lying motionless in bed, staring at the wall or sleeping. But my grades still hadn't improved, so they thought denying me of privacy solitude by taking away my bedroom door would persuade me to get my grades up. Spoiler alert, it didn't, lol. My stepmom and dad did this too. I was into choir and loved music and they would take things that brought me any joy. As the eldest son of a Southern Baptist preacher, I was held to some high standards. Being seen and not heard, and that my every action was a reflection of my father as a leader to his congregation. I found music to be a great outlet, but of course any non-Christian music was not allowed and immediately destroyed upon discovery. Spare the rod, spoil the child was a mantra ingrained in my daily life. Once I was into my teens and spankings with stretched out coat hangers was no longer enough to be considered punishment due to the lack of tears, my father moved on to shaving my head. Nothing like the constant reminder of how unworthy one is once their physical source of personal identity is forcibly removed. Frick, this thread sucks. Oh, one I can answer. My mother is an honest to God narcissist. I graduated from high school early at 16 and didn't go to college immediately, so I worked a part-time job while all my friends went to school. Anyways, when all my friends graduated high school, we celebrated by going to the movies. My friend's mom dropped us off and another friend's father was going to be picking us up. My mom was very upset at me going to the movies anyways, since it wasn't going to be over until after 9 PM. By bedtime at the time. Anyways, finally she lets me go on the condition that friend's dad gets me home by 10 PM. My friend's father ran into late night construction on the way home with me and several other friends in the van, and the closer it got to 10 PM the more I started freaking out, telling everyone I was going to be in huge trouble if I didn't get home like right now. My friend's father assured me he would speak to my mom and all would be fine. I was the first to be dropped off because I was panicking so severely. The moment the van pulls into the driveway, my mom comes barreling out of the house telling me she was going to kick my butt for being late and keeping her up. My friend's dad tries to calm her down and separate her from hitting me. That is when she realizes I'm chewing gum. Now my mother hated gum. Said the only reason you would ever chew gum was to hide something. So naturally she makes the assumption that I was late chewing gum because I was busy sucking my friend's dad's dong. Yup, that was the only explanation in her mind. She grounded me for 12 weeks, an entire summer. I wasn't allowed to have a phone, cell phone, TV or books the entire summer. Every morning my mom would take the cable box, home phone handset, and keyboard to make sure I couldn't do anything. Needless to say, my friends never invited me anywhere again in fear that my mom would call the cops and accuse me of sucking their dad's dong. She also used to report my car stolen if I didn't call her back when I was in college. Please tell me you two no longer see each other or speak. I refused to greet my sister's new boyfriend with more than a sup, so later that night my mom Hulk smashed my laptop, double fist style. I dealt with a narcissistic, abusive mother. Most of my punishments weren't huge because I was a really good kid, but on my 18th birthday, because I asked for gas money the day before, the first time ever, she took mine and her car keys with her to work, and took the shed key, no garage, so I couldn't even ride my bike, and left a note on the kitchen table saying happy 18th. Now you're an adult, so get out of my house. I spent my birthday alone, trapped, and miserable. All over $10. A few points. Yes, she is the pinnacle of our race, said narcissists. I have since moved out after being kicked out on and off for about a year. I am going on 23 this year and left at 19. I have no contact with her and never want to ever again. Yes, she is a C. Yes, she had the right to take the car and it was not GTA, as the car was registered and titled in her name. Something she did on purpose to be able to take the car whenever she wanted. And to everyone commenting, yeah, I got kicked out on my 18th birthday too. I'm sorry if I don't get to you personally, but I am so sorry and I hope you're all in better places. My mother went crazy and left the house in tears on my 18th birthday because I wanted to go out with my friends. She didn't come home till after 2 AM. Bit late, but one day, the news said school might be closed for a cold day, like a snow day, but for when it's cold enough your exposed skin freezes in 10 minutes. My mom demanded I start walking to school, or she'd report me to the cops as truant. We argued. TV said school started late that day. I decided to go anyways, the being better than the arguing. She then decided I was to stay home for her to call the cops. I shoved past her, which she yelled at me was assault, and then locked me out of the house. Halfway to school, I was told the school was closed. I had to call my dad to be let in the house again. That day I promised myself I'd leave home as soon as possible. I've stayed halfway across the country from my mom ever since. No TV, not as a punishment, Just no TV, ever, because apparently it lets the devil in. The second I, as the last kid, moved out, they started watching TV all the time. Some things the move believed that we had to endure as kids: women had to wear dresses, no TV video games, forced participation in religious ceremonies, little to no contact with the outside world. All my friends were Movites, exorcisms. The school I went to was part of the move group too. There was no escape. Wow, okay, just typing this out is kinda bringing me back to that place. I gotta stop now and take a break. As punishment, my dad would make us face a corner, stand on one leg and keep both arms straight up in the air for a certain length of time. If our leg or arms went down, he'd double the time. Sometimes he'd give you a surprise visit from his belt or shoe if he was particularly pee. At least I grew up to have fantastic balance. That's called a stress position. They did it to a certain prison's inmates. There was an entire scandal. When I was 13, no dating until uni. When I was 18, no dating until I finish uni. When I am 20 and about to graduate, no dating unless it's someone I choose for you. WTF. In a year or two it will be why haven't you found a good person to give you kids yet? I want grandchildren. My brother stepped on the PS2 controller cable, sending the PS2 flying off the shelf and smashing it all over the floor. As punishment, my dad whipped me across the back a few times, and when I tried to run away he threw some rocks at me. The whip marks stayed on my back for a few weeks. My grandmother was a retired English teacher. One day, I called my brother stupid. I was 4 or so. She filled me in on her rule that if I couldn't spell stupid but I called someone stupid, then it was really me that was stupid. Thus, I should never call someone a name that I couldn't spell. So in my 4-year-old head, rather than avoid name calling, realized that I did know how to spell dumb, so that word must be permitted. I spent the rest of the day overusing the word dumb, and she wasn't quite sure what to do at that point. Mum gave me a black eye one night when I came home from a friend's birthday party at a skate rink. She made me tell people that I fell down and got hit in the eye by one of the wheels on a skate. I was 12. It was because I forgot to put away the dishes before I left. She also regularly broke remote controls, throwing them at me, would slam my doors open so hard the doorknobs would smash through the drywall, stole the allowance my granddad gave me, no matter where I hid it, and recently ripped a pair of my headphones out of my ears while I was using them and broke them by repeatedly whipping me in the face with them, then followed it up by punching me a few times in the face. The last instance was about 4-5 months ago. I moved out and she regularly contacts me demanding money. I really hope you aren't giving her money. We weren't allowed to have food upstairs, but I had food wrappers in my trash can, so they searched my whole room, ripping clothes off hangers, throwing stuff out of drawers, etc. And for 3 months I wasn't allowed in my room for anything unless accompanied by one of them. I slept on the couch. My mom accused me of sleeping with my stepfather and grounded me for months at a time because I wouldn't confess to something I didn't do. I have a little book worth of stories of the abuse I survived through, but one time Dr. Phil's show told my mother that having a bed was a luxury for kids, so she immediately took mine away. I slept on a cold wood floor until I escaped that heck hole and cut off all contact. My dorm in college was the first real bed I'd slept in for 10 years. I didn't own a bed when I moved into my first apartment after college, so I was back on the wood floor. I'd moved in with the clothes on my back, my cat and her stuff, and my laptop, which I used to make money by transcribing at night while I worked for 12 hours a week at a deli. It was the only place that would hire me since I didn't have access to my own car. I cried myself to sleep every night on that wood floor. It was a reminder of how much I'd failed, leaving myself back in that position. My roommate must have heard me crying one night and figured it was back pain, because they lent me an air mattress to sleep on. It was like I'd moved into a 4-star hotel. Eventually I saved up a spare $50 and bought a bed off Craigslist. Sketchy, but I hadn't owned my own bed in 16 years before that. I still have the bed and refuse to part with it because I don't want to end up on the floor again. I have many chronic back problems that I don't think will ever be fixed due to being forced to sleep on a floor starting at age 7. I take pain meds when I can and do yoga, but it does not help. Sometimes when I can't sleep in my normal bed, I find myself still defaulting to the floor. When I wake up I cry because I'm worried I'll always be like this. Parents have no idea how much they can frick up their kids. Frick Dr. Phil. Well, this one time I didn't want to finish drinking my milk, so my dad threw the cup across the room, shattering it and getting milk everywhere, while he proceeded to flip my chair over while I was still in it. Then he crouched over my body saying, "You wanna frick with me a bunch," and stormed out telling me to clean up the mess. And just lots more stuff like that. Whoa. Once said whatever to my dad in a Bubba Gump's restaurant on vacation in Hawaii. He proceeded to scream at me and yelled at me to get out of the restaurant. I just sat there, mortified, and he left instead. I got grounded from an end of year party. I was 11, for getting a B on a paper. Even though I still got all A's, I was devastated. It was thrown by my best friend and I was never allowed to do anything, and I had been looking forward to it all year. I had the perfect dress to wear because my aunts, via marriage, mother had taken me shopping and bought a school dress that made me feel like Molly fricking Ringwald. I was never allowed to wear it before and it had been in my closet since September. I was seriously having a Cinderella moment, although I honestly related more to Jane Eyre because I was adopted and a bookworm. The day of the party I'm bawling. I'm a good kid. I try to be perfect every waking moment. Now I'm grounded from my best friend's party. The mom of my best friend knows how tough it is at home. I'm screamed at, belittled, hit all the time. This party was a fricking beacon. Arlene, the BFF mom, barges in my house, tells me to get ready and get my stuff together because I'll be spending the night. My mom protests. How about I call CPS about the 50 fricking cats in your house? I go to the party and Arlene teaches me to be a bad butt. Frick yeah, Arlene. I had all the usual punishments. No video games for a week. No TV for X nights. No pocket money this week. Groundings. You name it, I probably had it at one point or another. One particular punishment tops the rest though, for creativity and cruelty. One day I was at a friend's place with my parents and discovered that if we opened his bedroom window all the way, we could squeeze out of it and climb onto his roof. His bedroom was on the second floor of their house and they lived on top of a hill. So if we had fallen, we would have fallen probably 7-8 meters, then tumbled another 20-30 meters to the bottom of the hill. Anyway, both sets of parents walk outside at one point and hear us talking from the roof. They flip their lids and call us back inside. We scramble back into his bedroom and are sitting there terrified when our parents storm in. We get called down into the kitchen and are told to sit down at the kitchen table and await our punishment. My friend's dad opens up the pantry and starts pulling things out. Things to make a sandwich. Then it hits us like a ton of bricks. Our punishment is to eat a sandwich made of the most ill-complimenting, grotesque food combinations that he had at his disposal. The final product ended up being an unholy blend of Vegemite, oysters, anchovies, cheese, creamed corn, raw beef mince and hot English mustard. I actually don't really recall what it tasted like, other than being awful. Looking back on it as an adult, I reckon it was just as much for their entertainment than our punishment, but dang if it wasn't creative. Wooden spoon. I got the wooden spoon until I was probably 15. Then when my mom busted it over my backside because I wouldn't stop laughing, she moved to the metal one. Standing in the corner was another big one. My youngest sister got smart though and would get the corner where she could see the TV. So that was exchanged for flat walls on your knees, Malcolm in the Middle style. Another weird one I got was when my sister and I wouldn't stop fighting. My mom made us sit next to each other holding hands and not speaking for hours on end. My mom had a brilliant way to get us to stop fighting. I have no idea how she thought of it, but after the first time it was a go-to punishment. The two offending parties had to sit forehead to forehead and fold socks together. Within 10 minutes no more fighting, just laughing because we each looked like a cyclops. Socks were partially folded and no more angry screaming children. I asked my mum not to cough over the drink I made. She was ill and it was on the counter. She spat in it and hit me across the head a couple of times. My mom threw a brick at my head. Yes, it connected. Because I called her a bee. I never even opened my mouth, so apparently it was telepathy. When I was little I would bite my brother. Parents would punish me by sprinkling Tabasco sauce on my tongue. The years that followed, I developed a taste for it. My mom used to make my brother drink hot sauce, and he kept the fact that he loved hot sauce secret for years. I couldn't drink water from my bathroom. My bathroom genuinely had colder water and the best water in the house. Mom got suspicious when I'd leave to my bathroom for a few seconds every few minutes. IDK what she possibly thought I was doing, but no more bathroom water and I had to drink lukewarm peasant water like the rest of my family. It's mild but also freaking petty and plainly insane. Parents of Reddit, what is the worst way your kids have ever embarrassed you? At a bakery near my house my sister asked my mom, "That man has big bum. How does he fit on the toilet?" He heard, and so did everyone else in the store. My mom found a new bakery. My boy, when he was learning to talk, he said dong instead of clock. He was infatuated with them and would point and scream dong dong. One day we were in Target and went down the clock aisle, and the next thing I hear is him screaming, "There are dongs everywhere." Okay, not really their fault, but this is the story. I'm cleaning out the garage and have a bunch of stuff in the driveway to pull out the lawnmower for the first mow of spring. As I'm driving the mower I start to notice people driving by slowing down and looking mad at me. It was weird but I didn't think too much about it. Then 2 different people flipped me off and a few others yelled, but since I was driving the mower I couldn't hear what they were saying. Plus they were driving. Finally I can't stand it and have no clue why my mowing is pee everyone off, so I shut the mower off and start to go inside. Then I'm walking by my driveway, not visible from where I was mowing, and see my children, ages 5 and 6, climbed into my dog's old cage and somehow locked themselves in. So it looked to everyone like I locked my kids in a cage while I mowed the lawn. Not cool. When my son was in 2nd grade, they wrote a book about their mothers for Mother's Day. It was cute because for a month he would ask random questions about my life and follow up with, "In case you are wondering why I asked, there's no reason." When he brought home the book, I read it and was thrilled. When I was done, I set it down and only then noticed the cover. They had drawn a 8.5x11 portrait-like photo of their mothers for the front. It showed me with a huge smile, messed up hair, and a shirt that said "Let's Get Lit" across the front. It was in reference to a shirt I had bought their father for Christmas with a lit up Christmas tree. Not only had I never worn it, he conveniently left the tree out of the portrait. I was mortified, and when I asked him why he did that, his reply was, "You look good in green," and it's the only green shirt I could remember. I'm sure his teacher's obvious dislike for me was not a coincidence. I would just casually show up to his class in the middle of February wearing your husband's shirt. Oh, how dumb of me, I must have grabbed the wrong shirt. The Christmas one that says "Let's Get Lit" on it. Not my kid, actually my aunt's. They were in a department store and he was wandering around aimlessly while she shopped. Suddenly, she hears him yell, "Mommy, come here, you have to see this." She goes over to the children's department and finds him pointing at a little person. He was an employee of the store. "Look, Mom, this is so cool," he called, pointing excitedly. She didn't know what to say. "Oh, yes, he works here. He gets to come here every day. That is cool." "No, Mommy, I mean it's cool because he is a Muppet." She apologized, grabbed my cousin and ran away. I don't have kids, but I actually remember doing this to my dad. I was in kindergarten, and every day when the kids were picked up from school, the parents had to do a sign out. I remember standing at the teacher's desk with my dad while he signed me out and made idle chit chat with the teacher. I remember her glancing at me and feeling like I needed to contribute something to the conversation, so I just blurted out, "My daddy sleeps naked." I think it was something I had only recently discovered and thought it was just a fun fact. My dad was mortified. My wife and I had her brother and his girlfriend over for dinner. While we were chatting over coffee, our young son walked up to the table and stood my wife's pink vibrator on a placemat and asked, "What's this, daddy?" He burst out laughing. Wife died of embarrassment. The girlfriend looked everywhere but the table and I just picked it up and said to my son, "That's mommy's, shall we put it back?" It was soon forgotten when more wine was drunk. When my son was about 3, we went to Jamba Juice. It was packed, of course. As I was ordering, he squirmed out of my hand and went about 20 feet away from me. Proceeded to walk back and forth throwing his arms around and yelled at the top of his little lungs, "Frick, frick, frick." He looked like a crazy homeless person. I was completely mortified. That sounds hilarious. When I was 4 we went to Olive Garden. I saw a black man at the table next to us and said Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, luckily he just laughed about it. I did this in an elevator when my family went on vacation, except it was an Asian guy and I asked him if he was Jackie Chan. My parents were embarrassed but he thought it was hilarious. My daughter saw a woman at a store who had very large breasts. She yells out, "Mama, that lady has big boobies. Why you have little boobies?" I do the exact same thing to my girlfriend all the time. Don't have kids. I did this to my parents at a mall. I spent a lot of my childhood in India, so I wasn't that familiar with how things went in the US. I was walking with my parents in the mall when I saw a lady who had her kid on one of those leashes for kids. So I yell out across the mall, "Look, they have a kid for a pet." The lady, looking really annoyed, picked up a leashed kid and walked away. I'm going to say this whenever I see someone with a child leash now. Hold your freaking kid's hand. He's not a dog. I don't remember where this took place or how old I was exactly, but I was young enough to talk and was still in a stroller, so I must have been about 3. Apparently, as we strolled past a woman who happened to be black, I loudly said, "Hi Oprah." I guess I had never seen a black woman besides Oprah. My mom was pretty embarrassed, but this woman was apparently flattered and laughed, so I guess it wasn't all that bad. This happened to a friend who works at a daycare. She was helping a kid take his coat and boots off when the kid decides to blurt out, "My mommy has a really hairy front butt." My friend looks at the kid, tells him not to talk about his mommy's front butt and continues like nothing happened. She's pretty professional considering I would have laughed my butt off, then made the kid repeat it for my own humor to others. I started laughing so hard my roommate knocked on the door to comfort me and ask why I was crying. My dad once told me about the time he took me to a grocery store to just do some basic grocery shopping and I ended up wandering off and started screaming help as loud as I could when he found me, as I was a blonde fair-skinned kid and my dad was a tall Greek Italian with dark hair and tan skin. Security ended up restraining my dad since they couldn't believe we were related and my mum had to be called over to confirm that I was his daughter. My mother's story, because I asked her. My brother was playing t-ball and I was about 5 years old at the time. Mom was talking to my brother's friend's mother and some other mothers. This mother happened to be deaf, but read lips and spoke. I did not know what deaf was at this moment, or didn't pick up that she was. Anyways, my brother's friend takes a baseball to the face, and his cheek is swelling. Someone yells, "You okay?" to which the friend replied, "I'm fine," but had a very swollen mouthed accent to it. 5-year-old me decided to yell back, "No you're not. You sound like your mother." My mother added, "We were all just glad she couldn't hear you say that," and pretended it didn't happen. My sister taught her 5-year-old daughter the proper names for genitals. One day when my sister was filling her car with petrol, my niece pointed at a lady nearby yelling, "Look mummy, that lady has a big vagina." Everyone heard. The lady had a camel toe. When I was kid, in 2nd grade there was some sort of anti-drinking and driving campaign. I didn't understand the concept of it, so when the teacher said, "I hope none of your parents drink and drive," I raised my hand proudly and said that my dad does. My dad drank Coca-Cola. I didn't know the difference between Coke and beer. All I knew was they were brown, bubbly, and I wasn't allowed to drink it. Come to think of it, what is the point of a drinking and driving campaign in elementary school? So that you go home and nag your parents. I used to nag mine about all sorts of stupid crap I heard at school. When I was a kid, my mom and I went to the grocery store. As we're checking out, the cashier gives my mom the total, and my mom starts writing out a check. I look at her confused and say rather loudly, "But mommy, I thought you said you didn't have any money in the bank?" Oh god. Thanks for dredging up a memory for me. My mom was applying for a loan when I was 8. I blurted out, in front of the loan officer, "I thought daddy said you weren't allowed to do that. He said you spend too much money that we don't have already." Yeah, mom didn't get the loan. Ogidwe JPG. I remember my mom telling this story. Basically when my brother was little he learned the phrase "ah crap" but he would pronounce it AWW she. Apparently he said it all the time when he dropped something. So, there my mom is, Sitting in the Kingdom Hall. My grandma is a Jehovah's Witness and made us go to church every once in a while. When my brother dropped the Bible, it was dead silent and all you hear is AWW she ha ha. My little sister loved dress up. One day, my mother had a group of guys in her bathroom laying tiles. My sister, having the time of her life, walked in wearing my mom's laciest and most revealing lingerie. Oops. As my daughter is too young to embarrass me yet, here is what I did to my mother. The first time I saw a lady wearing a full burqa, I excitedly screamed, "Look mum, it's Darth Vader." I'm not sure if the lady in the burqa knew who Vader was, but she stopped and just stared at my mother, who went beetroot and ushered me out of the shop. Upvote for beetroot. Not me, but when my mom took my brother to the grocery store when he first learned how to talk, sitting in the shopping cart, he points at a black woman and says, "Look mom, it's Bill Cosby." Double quote. I was a little crap as a kid, and I can probably come up with way too many stories. My favorite, though, was when I was about 4 or 5 years old. I forget the details, but for some reason I was naked. Bath time, maybe, and I had managed to run out of the house. I ran as fast as I could down the street, but my father was faster than I was, and he caught me. As soon as he picked me up, I started yelling, "You're not my mother. You're not my father. Help. Help. Call the police." I think we'd just had some sort of anti-kidnapping speech at preschool. Now, we lived next door to a baseball field, and there happened to be a group of kids doing baseball practice, along with all their parents. So imagine my father, carrying his naked 5-year-old daughter, who's screaming her head off about being kidnapped. My father just kept repeating, "No, really, she's my daughter," in the face of all the angry, glaring baseball parents. Your kids are going to punish you for that one, and deservedly so. My dad used to pinch my fat face when I was around 5, and I hated it. One day we went to the park and he pinched my face and then walked off. Angrily, I began searching for him to get my revenge. I saw him talking to a group of people, so I ran up to him and pantsed him. I pulled his underwear off too. When my son was about 3 years old, he went to daycare at the YWCA where I worked out. He had just been potty trained and was excited to wear big boy underpants and usually told everyone at daycare what kind he was wearing that day. So one morning the cute guy I'd been flirting with holds the door open for us and my son says, "I'm wearing my Superman undies today." Cute, right? Then he says my mom is just wearing big, white ones. Tagged as big white undies. Don't have kids, but I remember when I was younger, 5ish maybe, my brother was 7 or so, my mom was in a minor car accident while driving us downtown. It was just a rear ending, but both of the cars pulled over and waited for the police. Not sure why they came, but they did. The police officer asked my mom if there was anyone else in the van and she said yes, so he asked her to open the door. At this time my brother and I thought it would be hilarious to drape ourselves over the car seats and act dead when the police officer opened the door. So yeah, frazzled mom and police opened the door. My brother and I are sprawled on the seats, eyes closed and not moving. She was mortified. I do believe we started laughing after that, so all was well. We were driving down to the local village and had stopped to talk to a well-respected matriarch type. Having opened the window to engage in polite conversation, my 3-year-old daughter announced, "My dad has a willy." Awkward. "So, if you'd be so kind to let me know if you see it, I'd be so appreciative," and then drive off. I don't understand why more parents just don't back their kids in such situations. I have 2 girls, 10 and 9. I decided to gather up their cousins, my niece and nephew, and take them to go see Johnny English. The theater was moderately full and it was the daytime, so children weren't minded too much. That was until my 9-year-old decided to test everyone's noses and unleash a series of hellish farts that would make a grown man with a beefy bean burrito fetish cry. She continued to fart with no regard to the people behind us really, and I told her to let me know if she had to use the bathroom. Nope, didn't work. She kept quiet, covering her fart with laughs up until the point I flat out asked, "Little girl, do you have to boo-boo? I'll take you to the bathroom, please stop." Of course, she didn't. Silent but deadlies, little poppers, big humps, and I seriously started to think she did it on purpose. The people behind us moved, and as soon as ending credits went, we hightailed it out of there. She didn't have to use the bathroom, but I had a long discussion about her farting habits. I don't know if it was that new healthy pack that AMC has for kids, wheat chips with apple juice, if I remember that right, but good lord, that was the worst. TLDR. Kid farts up movie theater. People gagged and moved as a result. At least you can keep that story for when she's older and brings her friends back to the house. My 2.5-year-old son is going through a bit of a train phase. Goes nuts when we pass by a train. Wants to watch Thomas the Train all day, etc, etc. So it should come as no surprise that he has latched onto a toy train as his favorite toy. The toy is the train named Percy from Thomas the Train Show. Everywhere we go he has to be holding Percy. Problem is that he is also quite clumsy still. The moment he drops Percy it's a mad dash to hurry up and get the train back to him. You see, the problem is that he can't quite enunciate the word Percy. Instead he says P, or rather he is sobbing out the word P at the top of his lungs, over and over. Not a parent, but my little sister who is 9 years younger than me. When she was 3, she, my mom, and I went to the store. We were standing on line to check out and an obese guy with crutches was standing in front of us. But my little sister opens her mouth and starts to say pretty loud, "Why is that guy?" My mom thought she was going to say "Why is that guy on crutches?" but instead she said, "Why is that guy so fat?" I never knew the shade of red my mom turned was possible. When my daughter was 4 and 5 years old I was still in contact with my mom, and she would spend the night on Saturdays with her due to my work schedule. On Sundays she would go to church with her. About 5 months after this schedule started, my mom came home to tell me that my daughter had apparently told everyone in church that I was dead. They never questioned her since they had never met me and she had only gone to church with my mom. I guess it came up in Sunday school when they were making Mother's Day cards and she didn't want to make one for me, so she told them I was dead. Her reasoning was that she was smart enough, even at 4, to know I thought church was a joke, and so didn't want to participate in making me church crafts. I could not stop laughing. The only thing that tops this is when she got up and had an argument with the preacher over Easter, because he was just not understanding that Jesus was a zombie. When I was about 9, my little sister said she had to show me something in my parents' closet. So when the coast was clear, we'd go in there and she climbs up on the high shelf and pulls down a dildo. This dildo was designed to look like a real dong, which is how me and my sister knew what it was so naturally. When my dad comes home from work, I say, "Hey dad, why do you have a fake dongadoodle do in your closet?" I can't even imagine how embarrassed he must have been. I quickly learned not to talk about dongadoodle-doos in my house. First post to make me literally laugh out loud. I will use the term dongadoodle-doo with my kids. I don't have kids, but I remember doing this to my parents. We had an assignment in class that asked what we were most afraid of. The assumed answers was stuff like bears and snakes. Not long before this my mother, trying to be authoritative, stated that my brothers and I should be more afraid to do anything bad because the consequences would never be the same. She would get really angry. Anyway, I wrote on my paper that I was afraid of both my parents. Didn't want to leave my dad out either. My teacher never got to see it before the end of the day, so I brought it home. My parents flipped. My mother was freaking out, asking me why I would write something like that. Probably with the best 7-year-old troll face ever. I told her, "You said I should be afraid of you." They erased my answer and took me out for pizza afterward. Sorta in the same vein, my 3-year-old called a black lady at Target chocolate. Her reaction was the worst possible one. She laughed, and for a freaking month he called every black person we saw chocolate. When I was little, my mom used to give me small taps on the butt to tell me I'm doing something I'm not supposed to do. So one day, I was at Disneyland and a complete stranger offers me candy. My mother immediately whisks me away and takes me to the bathroom to explain to me why I must never accept candy from strangers or talk to strangers in general. Being the 3-year-old me and having no clue what was going on, I just screamed, "Don't hit me. Don't hit me. I'm sorry." I wonder what my mom felt like as we exited the crowded bathroom. Not my kid, but something I did that my mom will not let me forget to this day. When I was really little, I was probably 3 when this happened. My parents, who are white, lived in a predominantly black area of Oakland. One afternoon, my mom was doing some work at home and I was watching a nature show about apes on Discovery. After she finished her work, we went to the grocery store. After hours shopping, on our way out the door, my mom was pushing me in the cart as we passed a group of large African American gentlemen. Recalling the show I'd been watching that afternoon, I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Mommy, mommy, look at the gorillas." As she tells it, she couldn't even get out the words to apologize. Just avoided eye contact with every human being around and left as quickly as possible. My dad said he was both embarrassed and proud when we were at the supermarket one time and I saw a dump rack. Me being 1 and 1/2 at the time pointed at it and started yelling dump fuck, dump fuck, dump fuck. He tried to correct me, but I just kept shouting out dump fuck. Dump truck. Asked my mom for this one and it's kind of funny. Anyways, when I was a youngster my parents sent me to a daycare run by nuns. I was really social but had a tendency to be a little bad sometimes. So one time as my mom is picking me up, the nun told her that I had sat on a girl and told her let's make babies. My mom was horrified. Funny maybe yes, but she said I got spanked afterwards. No recollection of this at all. When I was about 6, I went grocery shopping with my dad. As we are walking through an aisle we see a man shopping who only has one arm. So being the 6-year-old I stuck both my arms in my sleeves so only my elbows were sticking out and flapped them around. My dad said he has never been more embarrassed in his life. That may have been the last time he took me shopping. Dang, if only I had known about this get out of jail free card sooner. I was working in a kindergarten. Kids were eating lunch in complete silence when one kid suddenly blurted out, "My mom has a beard on her pee-pee." All the employees cracked up. When my son was about 8, and coincidentally, shortly before we discovered he's red-green colorblind, I let him pick his own outfit before going with me to run some errands on a Saturday. He wore a plaid shirt, different plaid shorts, red cowboy boots, and a rainbow striped beanie hat with a propeller on top. It was okay, though. My mere existence embarrassed the heck out of him when he was in his early teens. I suppose we're even now that he's in his 20s. I died when I got to the propeller hat. I remember when I was really young, maybe 4 or 5 years old, Mom and Dad took me grocery shopping with them at the local IGA. I told them I had to pee but they told me I had to hold it. Eventually I couldn't hold it any longer so I went to the magazine section, grabbed a magazine and sat on the floor and peed. Then I got up, put the magazine back and found my parents, not realizing that my parents immediately knew from the smell and from the fact that my pants were soaked what I'd just done. They were so embarrassed. But when you gotta go, there's got to be a thread somewhere in the bowels of Reddit that includes the story of the IGA employee who found the magazine soaked in pee on the rack. When I was about 2-3 I called frogs fuckies. I was trying to say frogies. So one day while at the grocery store I see some frog picture and started screaming, "Look at the fuckies. Looks at the fuckies, mommy." At 23 fuckies was something quite different. This is something I did as a kid. I was probably 8 or 9 and I'd gone roller skating with some friends and the minister at my church. 2 of the girls in the group were his daughters. My friends and I were standing around, bragging about how grown up we were and the badass things our parents let us do because we were so mature. I didn't understand at the time what an X-rated movie was. I just knew it was worse than an R rating. So I figured it just meant a super grown up kind of movie. Hoping to impress my friends, I said something like, "My mom and dad let me watch X-rated movies with them all the time." Our minister was standing just a few feet away and definitely heard me. My parents weren't even there, but even years later when I told them, they were mortified. Even though our minister moved away like 20 years ago, it still makes me feel like a huge jackass. To be fair, you didn't know. Parents of Reddit, did your child ever do something that made you say, "I bet she grows up to be a" insert job title? Did they turn out how you expected? My brother once got drunk and told me that everyone thought I was going to be a frick up but that I turned out alright. It was a very touching moment. Drunk words are sober thoughts. My sister and I are 2 years apart. Obviously I learned to count first. She would brag to all of her friends, "My big brother is so cool. He can count to 100. My parents always remind me of the time I agreed to count her pennies for her at a fee of $1 for every 100 pennies. Needless to say, I'm now in banking. If you were a good banker, you would have charged $1.10. My dad is a teacher, and unfortunately he often predicts which kids will end up in prison with a high degree of accuracy. A little off topic, but I was at the playground with a friend's kids a couple days ago, and her 4-year-old daughter was obsessed with a fire pole. When she wasn't sliding down it, she was hugging it and spinning around it. After watching her slide down it, I said to her, "Wow, you're really good at that. You should be a firewoman." She looked at me, shook her head defiantly, spun around the pole, and said, "No, I'm gonna be a dancer." It took me 3 tries to explain to her mother why I couldn't stop laughing. Maybe instead of a pole dancer, maybe she'll like more of a Cirque du Soleil sort of thing, when they do all that amazing acrobatic stuff. Yes, I have a 4-year-old girl. Last she had 2 vegetables on her plate. I told her she had to eat one of the 2. I come back and she has chopped up the carrots and mixed it with the potato salad. She looks at me with the straightest face and says, "Daddy, I didn't like the way those carrots tasted, but I ate them because I'm a good girl." I believe she's going to grow up and be a con artist. The long con has begun. My 7-year-old wants to be a knight. I'm trying to convince him to take some courses in reaving, so he'll have something to fall back on if he doesn't make it through the squire draft. If the knight thing doesn't work out, they can always become a sellsword, or maybe even join the Night's Watch as they are willing to make that commitment. I was at church and the priest would have all the kids come to the front for the gospel. After the reading he would engage with the kids about what was read. This one time he asked what a prophet was. My hand shot up. He gives me the mic and I tell him and all the church all the money left over received for good and services after expenses. Everyone laughed and the priest said, "It looked like we have a future banker here." He was close. I am an accountant. Reminds me of the time my 2nd grade teacher asked what a medium is. She was looking for what it means in relation to art, like paint or charcoal. I eagerly raised my hand and said something along the lines of someone who can talk to ghosts. I did not become a medium. I work in predictive analytics now. 3 grown children. With only one could we tell from a young age what he was going to do. He was enthralled with machines and how everything worked. When we went to carnivals he didn't want to ride the rides, he wanted to look underneath and see how the motors worked. He loved taking things apart and putting back together. He also loved to build things. Yes, he is a mechanical engineer. The other 2 had lots of interests, but it wasn't until they were older that they settled on one thing. We just wanted all of them to be happy, healthy and productive, and they are. Mission accomplished. Posts like this make me wonder what my parents think of my siblings and me. One was murdered by a drug addict she used to sell to, another is an ex-felon that can't get his life straight, and the other is an oft misanthropic, nihilistic loser with absolutely no direction in life. I wonder if they say, "Wow, I wasted my best years for that." My father said he once saw me trip over the dog, do a somersault, and get back up without spilling any of the full glass of milk. He said I was going to be an alcoholic. I am. I should feel bad for upvoting that, but damn it man, you made a plan and stuck with it. When I was a kid I liked playing doctor and drawing squiggly lines on my notebook pretending to write prescriptions. My dad even bought a real stethoscope when I was 7 because I was destined to be a doctor. And now I have an art degree. That's so sad. For your dad. My youngest son would argue over everything. He would even ask questions just to argue over my answer. Thought he would grow up to be a professional litigator. He is an adult now and moves from house to house, his friends and our family, milking from them everything he can until they kick him out. He only holds a job when he absolutely has to. He blames me for all his problems. Whenever I hear parents say that their kid is so great at arguing that they will be an attorney, I always cringe because I think they are just raising an butthole. My son won the first 2 science fairs his school had. The first was a Tesla coil that ran off of AA batteries. Second was a coil gun made from disposable cameras. I'm not sure if he's going to be an engineer or Hubert Farnsworth. Why not both? Most large universities offer engineering science as a specialization. My daughter, 3, at her sister's birthday party. 1. Noticed everyone was drinking out of a cup. Hey everyone, we all have drinks. It's a drinking party. She's probably going to be pretty fun in college. I'm going to pretend that's not happening. When I was young, I always wanted to play with my father's video camera. I am in my mid-20s now and have paid my rent for the last 3 years by directing commercials and music videos. My brother was always building something. Lego, Caner, Lincoln Logs, train sets, roller coaster tycoon. He's now an engineer. So was I, and my mom thought I was going to be an engineer, and now I'm saving up for law school. As a kid I always begged my parents for chemistry sets and telescopes and spent a lot of time walking in the forest behind my house. Not sure why my parents let me do this, and now I'm a scientist. Although I always wanted to be a dog catcher as a kid. It's the person that goes around rounding up stray animals in my hometown. I wanted to do it because usually they ended up being put down and I wanted to just keep them all from dying. I loved chemistry and science kits as a child. Then I grew up and have dyscalculia, so I'm going for an art history degree. My parents must be disappointed. As a possessor of 3 college tuition fees, I think I got this one. Youngest son. Law school. No, he wasn't argumentative. That's an excuse for bad parents. He was very empathetic and inquisitive. He always knew how everyone around him felt and would bring flowers, dandelions, for my wife when he knew she had a bad day. Wife believed he would be a social worker. Friend of mine, who is a lawyer, said that he should be one. I jokingly asked if lawyers were allowed to be that nice. To which he responded that my son will always know how to push people the right or wrong way. Middle daughter was born 2 months premature and has been small her whole life, so that ruled out sports, though she always wanted to pretend she was big and tough. Instead she was pretty emotionally tough and very competitive. Brothers got Lego? Well, I am going to build even better things than the directions say. Brothers drew pictures? Well, I want to draw better ones. Older brother is learning how to spell, masters the alphabet. Don't even get me started on video games. She's played more Smash Bros than anyone. Can't lose. She originally wanted to be a lawyer, because who doesn't like winning, but then decided she hated all the intro arts things and the subjectivity of it all. She's in engineering, has ridiculous grades, and basically shames the boys. Oldest son was an easy one to guess. He looks exactly like me, is an oldest sibling like me, and absolutely loves my wife and I. Would do anything to make us happy, just like I would for my mama. Bet my wife $5 he would get an MBA and my job when he was 4 years old. He's in his last year of his degree and has already interned at my company. Your middle daughter is going to take over the world because she can't stand it that anyone is better than her. She wouldn't settle for engineering, not with world domination as an option. My cousin was sick a lot when he was a kid. He was in and out of the hospital and constantly seeing doctors and being prescribed different medications and treatments. He's now a totally healthy, adult drug dealer. So he's a pharmacist. My parents saw me constantly ignoring everyone to read books and worried I'll grow up to be social retard. They're right. Don't worry, we still like you. My parents were never very good at predicting their offspring's futures. They thought I was going to be a doctor due to my attraction to the sciences and interest in bizarre medical conditions. Despite my intense fear of anything related to the body, I am in school to become a licensed psychologist. My second youngest brother always argued with people, so they thought he was going to become a lawyer. He graduated college with a useless degree and now lives in their basement. They thought my youngest brother was never going to amount to anything but a family burden due to his crippling autism. He is now successfully managing his own stable at the age of 19. My youngest brother has autism and I worry about his future because of it. This gives me a lot of hope for him. I would always steal my parents' camcorder and create these elaborate stories for my siblings to perform while I videotaped it and boss them around. Now I'm a television producer and I love every second. I remember my sister saying something so stupid that my stepfather told her, "You better grow up to be beautiful and marry a wealthy man. He's gorgeous, still single, not stupid anymore." Apparently as I grew up, I was very good at negotiating, not arguing to get my way, not begging for it, but negotiating for it. Mom, can you buy this toy for me? Number okay, but how about you buy the toy and I fold the laundry when we get home and so on. And I'm a CPA now. My line as a kid was I'll make you a deal. I'm in the conflict resolution field. My niece is 4. She asks a lot of questions about biology. It started out with why do we bleed and how do our eyes see, got pretty complex pretty quick. Now she has a solid grasp on organs and their functions, as well as the systems, circulatory, digestive, etc. in humans and some animals. So she's going places. My parents thought the same about me. At 4 I was asking all sorts of questions about atoms and how if they make up everything, what makes up them and other stuff of the like. I even teased them for years with grade skipping and taking lots of classes in science and math. Now I'm a musician. My brother's first word was cookie. He went on to work for Nabisco. He no longer works for them but is still in the food supply industry. On the other hand, my mother says my first word was Jesus and I was going to be a preacher. Like her, I'm an atheist. My son's first word was baby. Maybe he'll be an atheist. I am the kid. When I was a kid I would draw comics all the time to show my friends. They were nothing special, just raunchy 6th grade humor scribbled onto a sheet of notebook paper. However, the thing that impressed my parents when they got a hold of them was the sheer amount I had created in such a short amount of time. My mom then decided I was going to be a cartoonist when I grew up. I'm entering art school soon. As someone currently in art school, I have some advice. You're going to come across a lot of criticism and maybe doubt yourself at times. I'm learning to take it as it comes. Keep an open mind and remember to never let the criticism discourage you, and instead inspire you and push you further. Not job title, but I'm from southern Georgia. My son's mother is from North Dakota. My son was born in North Dakota and has never been out of state. He's around 5 years old. He was playing a game on his tablet when he won a level. He was so excited he put the tablet down, picked up one of his toy guns, and shot it into the air. He's my boy. Professional American. Not me but my cousin. All he would want was to build things. Legos, Mega Blocks, those wooden cube things, anything he could build with. One day his dad told him he'd be a construction worker and my cousin cried because he thought he was making fun of him. He is currently working on adding an extra new room to my house and he always says he loves what he does. When I was a kid I was always really fascinated with water going down the drain, streams, waterfalls and things like that. Fluids moving. I was equally excited by storms, snow, and any other weather related thing. My grandparents on my mother's side were also both scientists, and I would always do these experiments for kids with them. Now I'm an atmospheric science major preparing for a career in climatology research. Not me but my uncle. My grandma said he was going to be a failure. Well, he's now a hobo. Not that I'm saying hobo is a failure. He had wasted so many good opportunities. His advice to me, it's always the long run that matters. There's a good chance he failed because his mum told him he would. My kids are still kids but we'll see how this goes. My oldest I see as either doing a job with little kids, teacher, or with animals, vet tech zoologist. She loves little kids and animals, and they love her. Oh, your dog is really timid and doesn't like people? Your dog will like my kid. Guaranteed. She hasn't yet met an animal that didn't like her and gravitate to her. We went to the zoo here recently. She went up with this exhibit with a bunch of birds in it. Every bird in that exhibit went to the cage wall nearest her. They were jockeying for space closest to her. It was insane. She walked off. Some other person went up hoping for the same. Nope. I'm leaning more toward it being something with animals because she just loves animals, especially birds. My youngest, I'm not sure. A stunned woman probably. That kid climbs up door frames, columns, whatever. She has no fear. When I was a kid my parents were certain I would become an engineer. I worked in bicycle shops for nearly a decade, but now I'm in sales. My industry does require a lot of technical knowledge, so at least there's that connection. My son keeps telling me he is going to be a football player for the Texans. I want him to have a happy life, and that just isn't it. I hope you're Houstonian, because there's absolutely no other reason why you should want to play for the Texans. My older brother and I used to play cheers in our grandparents' bar in their basement. I was maybe 7 or 8 and my brother was 9 or 10. It was our favorite thing to do when we would visit. I was Sam and my brother was Norm. Ironically, I was a bartender for several years and my brother became an accountant. I would always draw cars as a child. I wanted to design cars. Mother said she didn't want me to get an art degree, so I became a mechanical engineer. Now I'm in grad school pursuing an industrial design degree, art degree, and will be designing products. Close enough. Take that, mom. Not a parent, but one of my first few words was hospital. I didn't pronounce it right. I would say something more like hospital, but nevertheless I am now in medical school. My kid is 18 months old and he's just learned to identify and name the butt. He runs up to people, taps their butt and says butt, very proudly and happily. I'm thinking he'll become a professional butt identifier. People will come to him from miles around and ask, what is this thing behind me? Looks like a butt to me. Sir and or madam. That'll be $500 please. Either that or a sex offender. We'll see how it goes. When my older brother was about 8 years old, he took my dad's torch from the garage and used it to hunt grasshoppers in our backfield, which was an acre of 2-foot tall dead grass. Needless to say, the entire field went up in flames. He's now worked for the fire department for 18 years and received the Firefighter of the Year award 3 times. At least he got those grasshoppers. Also, I totally thought you were British and were calling a flashlight a torch until the whole fire thing. When my younger son turned 2, we were visiting my in-laws who had a piano. He walked over to the piano and started pressing the keys. He wasn't banging on them like a toddler would do. He would press one key, dong his head, and listen to the sound it made. Everyone was like, oh, look, he's going to be a musician someday. So like 10 years go by, and I would periodically offer him music lessons of various kinds, but he was never interested. So we figured that the piano thing was a fluke. And then one day my older son's friend was teaching him to play guitar and the younger one asked him to teach him too. Within 6 months he could play just about anything and since then he's been in various bands and composed many songs. My grandfather was a veterinarian so my mother grew up around his practice. My grandmother told me that when my mom was 3 she was standing right outside her door and heard my mom say, okay, monkey, now hold still while I cut your balls off. She was neutering her stuffed monkey. My mother is now a veterinarian where she cuts animals' balls off for real. My mom mentioned that she could totally see one of my friends being a drug dealer when he grew up. His first year in college he was mipped. My son would shoot puppies with BB guns, poison guppies, and bash in small kittens' heads in. I took him to the child psychologist multiple times, but he would always say there is nothing really wrong with him. He just had an avid fixation on pain. So I said to him one day, my boy, I think someday you'll find a way to make your natural tendencies pay. You'll be a dentist. Tell him not to feed the plants. From the time I was about 3 or 4, I followed my mom around the kitchen, stirred things, chopped things, etc. I told them I was going to be a chef, and 2014 is my 3rd year studying culinary at a tech school, but 6th year studying culinary. Almost all of my English teachers wanted me to grow up to be a writer, but were crushed when I told them I wanted to be a chef. My youngest brother has been playing with building blocks and anything else he could get his hands on since he was really little. He's now building and programming robots in his junior year of high school with a full scholarship, and Nissan has been asking when he'll graduate for the past year or so they can steal him away. There was this policy on school trips that, because some parents didn't want their children to be allowed sweets, no children were allowed sweets, so no one would get jealous. I remember ranting to my parents that just because they don't get to have sweets doesn't mean I shouldn't have all the sweets I want. They said I should grow up to be a Tory MP. I am not a Tory MP. I so wanted you to be Boris. I used to make up languages, and apparently I could recite the alphabet before I got my sentences down properly. Currently applying to grad school for linguistics. My 6-year-old likes to take the heads off of action figures and stores them in empty water bottles. Like, they each get their own water bottle. Pretty sure he's gonna be a serial killer. I will keep you updated. When you stop updating us, we will assume you were correct. Parents of Reddit, what has been your most awkward encounter with your child's sex life? I woke up one night to the sound of my mum rummaging through my box of condoms, which I thought I had hidden well under my bed. I just need one. Sorry. We never spoke about it again. My son shows me every time he gets a boner. Look at my big penis. He's 2, but it's going to get uncomfortable soon. You should totally record this, and then when he is getting married play it at the reception, just to show him what being a parent will be like. Okay, I'm not a parent, but this is a good story, and every last one of my friends has heard about that incident with my granddad's funeral and the flash drive full of lesbian pee. When I was 17, my granddad died really suddenly, and in the midst of funeral preparations my father and his sister were trying to throw together a picture slideshow for the service. They stayed up until really late in the night, and when it was finally done, they didn't have a flash drive to move it off the computer. My dad let himself into my bedroom while I was sleeping, figuring I must have a couple of flash drives around, and dug one out of my desk drawer. It was the master drive, the one where I kept my entire pee stash, which at this point in my process of pee discovery consisted mostly of doujin manga of the graphic lesbian sex variety. He popped that little sucker into the computer, dragged 100 or so pictures of my recently deceased grandfather onto it, and handed it to his incredibly Southern Baptist fundamentalist sister to take home and proof before the funeral. My aunt is not a computer savvy person, and she wasn't fully aware that there could be other content on the flash drive besides pictures of my granddad. So when she plugged the flash drive into her computer and that helpful little dialog box popped up asking what she wanted to do, she very happily clicked view all images. And Jesus freaking Christ on a cracker, did she ever view some images? She hasn't looked me in the eyes in 5 years. That takes the cake for awkward. Now if only we had her side. I did something kinda similar to my mom, but it was accidentally leaving a hardcore lesbian pee link copied in the clipboard. She hit Ctrl V trying to open up some other link later, didn't actually copy the one she intended to, and suddenly there was strap-ons and titties. My mum once burst into my room just as my girlfriend was positioning herself over my face. I was completely naked with a rager. Needless to say, I quickly buried my face in clunge and my girlfriend and her were left staring at each other. Not sure if that's brilliant, selfish, or both. Either way, no eye contact. When I was a senior in high school, my lazy butt boyfriend and I would come home, flop down on my comfy bed, and nap usually through supper. My father and I had to sit down and talk about it, because my stepmom was offended that she was cooking vegetarian for me and I wasn't eating it. He told me, "I know sex is fun, it's really great, I love it, as long as you're using protection, have all the sex you want. Go ahead, do whatever, just be downstairs for supper time." He refused to listen when I told him we were just napping, and kept talking about how fun sex is. Hahaha, I think dads enjoy making things awkward. My mom and stepdad went to move my bed, found my vibrator between the mattresses. My mom walked in the bathroom to catch my masturbating with the shower head. Caught a boy sucking on my overly developed boobs at 16. My life was full of awkward moments. Edit. My mom caught a boy, not me. I knew what was going on. Sorry for the phrasing. I had a girl tell me I would never get her off from sex alone because I was competing with a vibrating shower head. Always thought that was some kinda weird myth, but she and many other girls have proved that stereotype quite accurate. My son had a half day his junior year of high school. He had told me that he was going to stay the night at his friend's house. I get a text message from him at 4:50 PM saying your dad just walked on me getting head. I later found out he meant to send this to his friend who left to get food while he was with his girlfriend in the guest bedroom. Also he was hammer drunk and didn't figure out he sent it to me until the morning. Oh, I read that as junior high school, not junior year of high school. A bit different. Never use a hairbrush to masturbate. Girls, when you see your sister mother borrowing said hairbrush, you will want to vomit. Or your college roommate who is too liberal with borrowing your stuff. I'm not a parent, but a big brother. Younger brother, 4, is sitting in his mini rocking chair in the middle of the living room watching a kid show, and the rest of the family is spread throughout the room locked in conversation. The attention is diverted when our mom tells him to stop playing with yourself. You can't do that in front of people. He just stares at her for a moment, gets up, walks to his room, and shuts the door. Awkward and awesome. Probably the most fantastic thing I've read all day. Getting home after a fantastic anniversary dinner and night with the wife. We get into the house and the wifey runs upstairs to get ready for some late night fun. Now to my knowledge one child should be asleep or is out and about, the other at a sleepover. While getting ready to head on up I hear some noises coming from the basement. I head down there and start hearing moaning from my den room. I open the door and my 16-year-old son is giving it to his girlfriend on my dang recliner. My mother's not on Reddit, but I'm sure this is hers. When I was 18 or so, we found out that my dad had a brain tumor. He lived in another state, so she got a call early one morning from his girlfriend saying that he had had a seizure and was in the hospital. They weren't sure what was going on. So she panicked, because they're still okay friends, so she was really worried. Started crying and freaking out, then realized she had to tell her kids. So, in her panic, she forgot to knock on my door before she burst in, finding me, her previously assumed to be heterosexual daughter, completely naked curled up around another completely naked woman, the whole room reeking of sex. She kind of froze while I scrambled for sheets to cover us and then muttered, "Your dad might be dying. I'll talk to you later," and slowly backed away. Frick. Rubbing his penis to a Madonna music video. I'm talking about, well before the age of masturbation. He doesn't know what he's doing. He just know it feels good. That was me. My mother walked in on me doing that. I used to strip down to my underwear and watch Return of the Jedi, specifically the scenes with Leia in the gold bikini, rewind and play over and over. Just knew something about it seemed right. Girlfriend and I have been dating for 4 years, and we started having sex quickly when she was 16 and I was 15. My parents always left us alone and never bothered us, knowing that we were gonna do what teens were gonna do. But one day we were doing it and we got risky. Neither of us had any clothes on, and when we were going doggy style, I was just about to see him when unannounced, my father walks into the room. Girlfriend grabs her tea, rushes for the covers. I just try to cover my dong with my arm yelling "get out," while my dad makes a noise sounding exactly like Hank Hill. Things are still weird between my GF and my dad, but later that day we high-fived. Blah. My GF and I used to have fun in my basement while my parents were blissfully unaware upstairs. Being the cautious and responsible young people that we were, we always used protection. Being the ignorant and unexperienced person that I was, I hid the used protection on top of a single tile of our drop ceiling. You know, the kind made of squares that you can push upwards. Oh yeah, that's also where I hid my homemade bongs and used masturbation rags. Basically, everything I wanted to keep secret from my parents. I was 17 at the time. Well, we were moving and apparently my parents considered the basement to be the room that needed cleaned out first. I awoke late one weekend morning to find my parents cleaning everything out. Little did I know, but a thorough investigation of every ceiling tile was going to be part of this process. So, I sat down in my basement waiting for a moment in which I could discreetly move my stash. Unfortunately, that moment never came. Instead, I watched my mother go tile by tile in every corner of our basement. Watching and waiting until she inevitably moved the forsaken tile, I was completely paralyzed. When she got to the one, she was greeted by having a ton, probably 100 or so of used condoms drop down on her head, covering her in every type of sexual byproduct you can imagine and forever shattering her innocent impression of her baby boy. Ignorance is bliss. True story. True to life. I feel more bad for your mom than for you. Not my kid, but my little cousin used to hump a talking Dora the Explorer doll, and all we could hear in the other room was Dora the Explorer, and panting until she would fall asleep. You're welcome. I'm not a parent, but it was pretty awkward when my father found toilet paper. I used it for fap time, under my bed. He just told me, "I don't know why there's a toilet paper under your bed, but the faster you remove it the better it will be for you." Man, my face was red. I just smiled and said okay. Then I was trying to avoid my father for 3 days. throwaway because my husband knows my screen name and he doesn't know that our daughter is sexually active. One day I came home early from work and I heard some weird noises coming from my daughter's room, so I went to go check it out and I saw her on top of her boyfriend. When I walked in, she jumped off of him and ran into her bathroom while her boyfriend laid there in shock. I quickly closed the door, and when her boyfriend left I had a talk with her and we never spoke of it again. Wow. Weird. You just perfectly described a situation that occurred between me and one of my exes and her mom. She just walked in the room, pretended to mess with the blinds, and then left though. So dang awkward. My dad walked in me getting a BJ from my girlfriend. He asked what I wanted for dinner. I told him I wanted macaroni. He left. My girlfriend didn't stop pleasuring me. How kind of her. He figured she had already ate. Not a parent, but an older friend told me this story. She's writing at her computer. Her 10-year-old son comes in, smears something on her arm. He says, "Mom, this came out my penis." She says, "Were you pleasuring yourself?" He admits. She then coolly assures him that this occurrence is a natural process. He's maturing sexually, etc. His response, "Think it'd make good face paint?" This is the most hilarious and gross thing I have read all day. Oh wow. That reminds me of the time my dad decided to have a conversation with me and my twin about how sperm is good for women, even if they swallow it or it gets on their skin. This is an absolutely true story, and I still don't know why it happened this way. So I had this girlfriend in high school who loved sex, and not just intercourse. I mean, she loved all kinds of sexual activities. It was a normal day for us to do it about 4 times in a 6-hour period, with lots of foreplay. Keep in mind, this is all happening when we're about 17-18 years old, so we were doing this at her house with her parents 1 floor below. Usually, we'd just throw on the television or a movie or two and go to town on each other. This one particular evening, I remember, I was very relaxed. I wasn't much in the mood for some heavy fricking, but I wasn't opposed to getting some attention in my dilly bits. So I remember just lying there, hands behind my head on this twin-size bed in a spare bedroom, and she starts undoing my zipper. She pulls my dong out and starts one of those gentle, almost cuddly but with her mouth kind of BJs. Guys should know all about this. As I mentioned, I was already pretty relaxed, and this kind of oral sex is pretty damn relaxing in itself. So I'm just hanging out, enjoying myself like I'm getting massaged in the best way possible when I roll my head over to the side and look directly into her mother's eyes. In this overly relaxed state, my instincts didn't kick in to make me panic and zip up. Nope. I just continued looking at my girlfriend's mom while her daughter is sucking my dong, beautifully, I must reiterate. Finally, mom clears her throat to get our attention, and then the panicking ensued. The whole thing probably lasted about 4 seconds, max, but from my perspective, it was forever. I never let my guard down one bit after that, but, man, I still remember that strangely magical moment. TLDR, I shared a moment with my girlfriend's mom during oral sex. My bedroom is right by my parents and the walls are pretty thin, which poses a problem. Pretty much any time I had a girl over, we ended up sleeping in one of the downstairs rooms after we fell asleep watching a movie. One time my mum came downstairs the morning after my girlfriend stayed over and said, "Can you please remove that?" I wasn't sure what she meant until I saw that she was pointing at the condom wrapper on the floor. She then looked me dead in the eye and said, "Awkward movement," and left the room. I cracked up laughing. My mum is awesome. Not a parent, but here is a fun story. Sitting in a crowded mall food court with younger sister and very religious grandmother I haven't seen in a while. Think 2+ years. Conversation is in a lull and it's getting awkward. Suddenly sister blurts out, "So Keisha, my kitty cat isn't a virgin." Silence for at least 10 seconds before my grandmother says, "Well, do you enjoy it?" I respond, "Yes," and she jokes, "Well, they're half the battle gone." She then offered to buy me condoms. TLDR. Sister told religious grandmother I was doing the beast with 2 backs. I can't even describe how cool your grandmother is. My parents found my pee stash when I was 12. I didn't actually figure out what to do with it until I was 14, but it was still awkward and my parents were pretty freaked out by it. Not a parent, but this had to be bad for the mom. My boyfriend's mom came home one day when we thought she was still at work. She opened the door, heard us having loud sex, then walked back outside and rang the doorbell to alert us. He jumped up to answer the door dripping in sweat only to be greeted by his mother. It was extremely awkward. I couldn't make eye contact with her for a while. My brother and his friend walked in on me watching pee in the living room when I was like 10. I'm a girl. My reaction was to run to the door and try to force them back out. Yeah, that was awkward. Parent of 13 years old son. A couple years ago I found the most adorable huge stuffed animal monkey on sale and I believe it was incorporated into my son's Christmas gifts that year. So Mr. Monkey soon lived in his room. A few months later, when I would tidy my son's room up I started noticing pieces of white fuzz laying on the floor around his bed. It finally dawns on me one day when I see that Mr. Monkey has a large hole in his ear. I still cannot bring myself to visualize my son sodomizing that thing. I pointed this hole out to my son one day and he begs me not to get rid of the monkey. I eventually did sometime later, but who knows how many stuffed animals he's raped. That last sentence made me laugh so hard. I also imagined if Toy Story was real, what that would be like. Till that with 3 sons my household will be going through an inordinate amount of lotion and toilet paper, and here I thought all my money would be spent trying to feed them. Parent here, Mom. Sue. My son starts to get interested in self-pleasure around 12 or so, and the reason I know this is that the body lotion I kept in the bathroom, a giant tub for after showers, is starting to move around and I am suddenly going through it at an alarming rate. I'm putting 2 and 2 together here. Frankly, it wasn't that he was jerking off or even using my cream. It wasn't expensive. It was that he never put it back. And every time he didn't I was left to know that he has just pulled one off. I knew he did, I just didn't want my face thrust in it every time, so to speak. So I took a tactful approach. Sweetie, when you wash my stuff in the bathroom can you please put it back where you got it? That didn't seem to work, even after numerous mentions. One day I even got sort of frustrated and said, look, I don't give a crap what you are slathering my body lotion on, but it's really pee me off that you cannot seem to put my things back where they belong. Please. This worked on and off, but I was still having to know that my cream was being depleted at an alarming rate. I was starting to wonder how many times a day that kid was abusing himself. Finally I grew a brain. I said, hun, you know how in the morning you have a hard time waking up? I find a morning shower the best way to wake up. Try it. I think you'll agree. Very refreshing. Of course, what I was assuming was that he would be in there with his morning glory and take care of it in the shower and there would be no hand cream issues. It actually did work. But now we go through a lot more cream rinse. Oh well, at least everything is right where I left it. Not sure why, but you had Molly Weasley's voice at some point in the story. Not a parent, so answering outside the question parameters, but trust me you need to hear this. So there I am sitting in the afterglow of a 40-minute pee search junk session with my junk firmly pinched in my right hand, uncut, used skin as bag. Suddenly I hear a knock at my door, and there isn't a lock on any bedroom doors in my house. My brain shoots itself. Do I pull up my pants and underwear first? Do I close all the tabs I still have open? Do I try to do something about the jizz that could leak everywhere with the slightest movement? 3 knocks. That's all I get. My mom's voice starts to come through the door on the first knock. Honey. Knock number 2. I'm going to bed. Are you in there? Knock number 3 and the door starts to open. All of this takes place in less than 2 or 3 seconds. My brain hasn't gotten past its initial stutter, and I decide to do too many things at once. I reach down with my free hand while standing in an awkward squat and hoist my pants back up around my waist. This isn't my first rodeo, but no one can move fast enough in the time frame I had. I sit back down just as the door squeaks open. My left hand flies to the mouse, and simultaneously I push myself across the plastic floor mat to wheel the office chair in front of my computer screen. Honey, I click furiously, slamming the mouse button harder than I had been beating my meat only a minute before. The windows close. All of them. Brain shoots itself again, and I realize I have just performed rookie mistake numero uno. No one just sits there staring at a blank screen. Hey mom, I realize I am also using my left hand reached all the way across my body to use the mouse on the right side of the keyboard. She is walking closer to the desk. I can hear her footprints muffled by the carpet. Oh god, why is she walking into the room? You okay, honey? Yeah, I'm fine, mom. Just working on a paper. I open a blank Word document just as I feel her hand come to a rest on the high-backed leather chair. I try to hunch down as much as I can over my lap to hide the fact that I am holding my flaccid penis to keep jizz from leaking all over my pants and groin. I know no one would believe that someone decided the instant they entered the room was the moment to open a blank Word document, but my brain is practically stalled. Okay, you sure you're okay? Yeah, I'm fine. My stomach just hurts a bit. I muster a fake groan, trying to imply that I am somewhat sick. It isn't hard to do. I feel like I could literally become ill from the situation. I feel her kiss the top of my head. Good night. Love you. Love you too. My brain has shut down. My penis is trying to retreat inside my body. My mom kissed me on the head right after I had finished jerking off while I was holding my dong and said I love you, which made me say it back. I didn't jerk off for like a week after that. My heart was racing, reading that. Must have been absolutely terrifying. When I was 15, I ordered a vibrating dildo online from drugstore.com and it arrived in the mail addressed to me while my parents were home. They normally work during the day, and my mom was all, hey, shiz Madeline, what did you order that was so big from drugstore.com? And I was like, oh, I can't tell you, and then I did and she laughed. It was a weird day, IDK. She was probably glad you were pleasuring yourself and not risking yourself with sex or something. My dad walked in the room when I was getting head. He smiled, laughed and said, come downstairs when you finish. Not sure if the pun was intended or not. Whoa, a lot of guys' dads are chill about their son getting dome. Pretty sure my dad would just turn and walk away and never ever mention it. My parents had to bear the horrible embarrassment and shock of finding a very large vibrating butt plug in one of my drawers. Not only did they find out their sweet little boy was gay, they got to find out in the most horrible and unsettling manner the size of things he sticks up his butt. Afterwards they just told me, we won't go into your stuff without asking anymore. Okay, deal with it. After I got a girlfriend for the first time, Mom, there is to be no sex in this house. Dad, for your mother, it's fair to assume it was awkward for them as well. As a parent, I want my children to have a good sex life. This is why I created an SM dungeon for my daughter. I'm not a parent. Seriously though, who wants no sex in this house? That's repressed nonsense. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.